The first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from our last meeting in December. Has everyone had a chance to look at these minutes? Any comments or questions? Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. We'll move to our preliminary hearings. The first item is in the matter of Caesar Mitchell. Mr. Lane, are you handling this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Would you like to begin?
Sure, and for Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Frank Strickland and Ms. Ann Lewis are here as well. If you want to, I don't know if you want to
Good
grab the
morning.
table.
Sure.
I would like to say we have a time limit of 20 minutes for each side. Do y'all think y'all can adhere to that, or you need a little more time?
We have something that's a little, I won't say it's inventive for y'all, but we have reached a partial agreement on 3 out of the 4 allegations. A number of allegations have also been removed. Before you, you're going to have a copy of the consent order as it is written now. There's one term that we have yet to come to agreement on, well, actually 2. They're interrelated. We've yet to come to an agreement on the amount of campaign expenditures that are not reported. And of course, we have not been able to agree on the civil penalty associated there too.
I hear you. Yeah.
So that's actually what we're going to be discussing with you today. Commissioners, y'all actually have 2 options. If you feel that you need more evidence and more time to consider the issue, you have the ability to find probable cause or reasonable grounds to believe that a violation of the act has occurred. In this case, can proceed to an administrative hearing before an administrative law judge before the Office of State Administrative Hearings. Or we can give you the facts as we see them, and then y'all can provide us guidance on what you feel the appropriate range should be and what the appropriate civil penalty for this outstanding issue is. Now, I'll go into more details about the case in the order now. That's just by way of preliminary of what's happening. Some key organizations and relevant dates for y'all to know. There are 2 organizations that govern Mr. Mitchell's campaigns for office. Now, this case does not touch on Mr. Mitchell's mayoral campaign, his current mayoral campaign. In fact, this case began in March of 2016, so that was before Mr. Mitchell announced his run for mayor. This audit is solely looking at his campaigns to become the president of the Atlanta City Council. So looking back in history, on April 7th, 2009, Mr. Mitchell filed what's called a Declaration of Intention to Accept Campaign Contributions. That is the legal mechanism under the Campaign Finance Act that allows a candidate himself or herself to begin raising campaign funds and making campaign expenditures so that they can run for office. On or about May 9th, 2009, Mr. Mitchell incorporated an organization known as Caesar Mitchell for Our Atlanta Incorporated. We abbreviate it everywhere that you're going to see from here on out as CMFOA. That is Mr. Mitchell's campaign committee, his campaign organization for his Atlanta City Council president's race. It's important to note, and it'll come later, that Mr. Mitchell did not register that committee with our office. There is a separate code section within the Campaign Finance Act that requires you to register all organizations that will be campaigning on your behalf and raising funds on your behalf, expending funds on your behalf. There are various reasons for that, and we can peel back that onion if you want. But the simplistic answer is the reason why is because the DOI allows candidates to control their funds. The campaign committee registration allows third parties to do it. You can hire a campaign treasurer, a campaign chair, a third-party vendor, what have you. That's why we require the registration. It's not just so we have duplicate paperwork that makes everyone angry. In 2012, Mr. Mitchell began hosting annually what was known as, or what is still known as the Caesar C. Mitchell Annual Champions Golf Challenge. And our understanding is it's been held annually since 2012. How this case came to our attention is we saw a number of media articles, blog postings, what have you, about the creation of what's called a leadership PAC. This is Mr. Mitchell's second organization, and it's known as Atlanta Next, a Caesar Mitchell Leadership PAC. We've shortened it to Atlanta Next. A leadership PAC, without going too far into the weeds, is an organization that is best known as Making Friends PAC. It is an organization in which you can raise unlimited sums of money, and then what you are supposed to do with Leadership PAC is to give that money to other candidates so that you build relationships with people, you have influence, you aka make friends. There were allegations, and there was enough for us to go on seeing that this Leadership PAC came into existence about the same time that Mr. Mitchell's campaign for the Atlanta City Council president, which had been paying for the golf tournament, was almost out of money, or at least it didn't have enough to maintain its current spending levels. And then you had this PAC, which it appeared was continuing to fund these events. And in fact, the golf challenge was continued to be funded by the Leadership PAC, but as we later found through investigation and evidence, that golf tournament's not a campaign event, it's more of a charitable function. The proceeds from it go to other entities, charitable events, what have you. So it wasn't a campaign event, but we didn't know that until the investigation began. On or about March 3rd, Atlanta Next files its notice of Section 527. That's before March 3rd, when we tried to find Atlanta Next, either with the IRS, with us, with the Federal Elections Commission. We couldn't find them anywhere. And by various regulations with the IRS, if you have a Leadership PAC, you have to register in one of those three places: the IRS, the Federal Elections Commission, or with us. They weren't registered anywhere. We don't enforce federal IRS code, so that's beyond our purview. It's just more food for thought on what led us to open the case. The other issue that we saw in common between the organizations was that both Caesar Mitchell for our Atlanta and Atlanta Next used the exact same campaign treasurer, that being Razor Consulting Group. They hired out a third-party consultant. Now, how did we get here? In February and March of 2016, as I previously said, we saw a number of news articles, we saw a number of posts. Of course, the rumor mill was running. We started peeling back the onion. An initial review also of Mr. Mitchell's campaign showed that a number of campaign filings and financial disclosures potentially contained violations of the Campaign Finance Act, namely that being reports were filed late and that reports were missing certain data. The contributions and expenditures were not fully disclosed. Now, we began the original complaint in March. We did not issue allegations as to the failure to disclose campaign contributions or the failure to disclose campaign expenditures, because we did not have enough evidence at that time to tell you exactly what we thought the numbers were. But we did begin the case with regards to the late filing of reports, as to the Political Action Committee, and on down the list. We also issued subpoenas to Mr. Mitchell personally, as well as to his campaign entities and to his PAC. We also subpoenaed records from Razor Consulting Group as well. The responses that came back from Atlanta Next and Caesar Mitchell for Atlanta, it was a long process. I know there were concerns on the part of Mr. Mitchell about turning over, I don't say sensitive campaign documents, but everyone, when they turn over their campaign bank records, get a little hesitant because of campaign routing numbers and account numbers and what have you. We had some initial disputes about the data that was being turned over. The first production of bank records, it had everything except the checks. Well, the problem for us in our audit is the vast majority of the campaign's expenditures were by check. And as everyone knows, when you look at your bank statement, it says check number 2525, $1,000, that's the end of the information. We were able to work out our differences. We did get those canceled checks. After performing a reconciliation audit, we issued what's called a notice of inspection in September of 2016. It may have been issued in August, but the actual inspection occurred in September of 2016. That notice of inspection allows commission staff to appear at the campaign headquarters or at the designated place by the candidate to review their filings, to review all of their records, and it allows us to more accurately pull together data. After that, we presented Mr. Mitchell and his counsel with an audit. It was our preliminary audit, and it said, we find that you have failed to disclose almost $200,000 worth of expenditures. You have failed to disclose almost $60,000 worth of contributions, and those are round numbers. At the time of our inspection, there was discussion about there was potentially errors by a third-party vendor. It seems that Mr. Mitchell uses a third-party vendor known as NPG Van. NPG Van, think of them as TurboTax for campaigns. There's other services like Aerostol and what have you. But there was discussion that there may have been an NPG Van data transmission error. our discussions at the time was get us the data, we'll talk about it, we'll rerun the numbers. From September till February, we had some correspondence back and forth, but there was no forward movement on providing us additional data to further refine our numbers. So in February 10th of 2017, we amended our complaint to include the allegations related to the failure to disclose campaign contributions and the failure to disclose campaign expenditures. As with all amendments to complaints, it tends to motivate people to get you stuff a lot faster. Once that complaint was amended, Mr. Mitchell's campaign personnel, Ms. Carter, his treasurer, who's with Razor Consulting Group, let us know that one of the reports, a December 31st, 2012 campaign contribution disclosure report, was actually miscategorized by the campaign as a different report in a different year that had multiple filings. We recategorized that report, we put in those numbers appropriately, showing that they were properly disclosed. That took care, it brought the number of expenditures from about 200 and something thousand down to about 191,000. And then the campaign contribution non-disclosure was almost cut in half. So it dropped to about 30,000. We had continuing discussions. We actually met in our office, and Mr. Mitchell's staff was able to explain to us that they were able to finally, I don't know who they had to threaten with their third-party vendor, to get the raw data of what they transmitted from their campaign to the third party, and then what the third party transmitted to us. In going through the line of code, not to sound like a whiner, I stayed at the office till 12:30 one night going through computer code, which is not the best thing in the world to do. The campaign expenditures dropped again once you added in about $97,000 worth of campaign expenditures that were reported by Mr. Mitchell to his third party, but who his third party, for whatever reason, didn't report to us. That dropped the number from about 191,000. It dropped it down to $93,000 and change of campaign expenditures not disclosed, and we'll further refine that number for you. As to the campaign contributions, it almost wiped those out and brought it almost to zero. Not quite, but it was close enough to be consistent with generally accepted accounting principles. It was less than 3%. So that explains that. Now, I'm going to come to you, as everyone knows and as everyone's reported, our complaint had a lot of violations listed in it, or alleged violations listed in it. By consent agreement and after investigation, we've been able to agree to the withdrawal of 6 of those allegations. They are, and we can go into these in more detail if y'all need, but I think this will be sufficient. The allegations regarding to improper use of campaign contributions for various expenses, for example, club membership dues, newspaper subscriptions, what have you. Further evidence revealed, like for the membership dues, it wasn't actually membership dues as it was reported, it was for a function. Well, having campaign functions at a private club, that's permissible and allowable, especially if it's a campaign function. So those allegations were removed by agreement, and it will be reflected in your proposed consent order that you have in front of you. As far as allegation number 2, the failure to file a December 31, 2012 campaign contribution disclosure report, that is the misclassified report that was identified for us. We have removed that allegation. The allegation related to the acceptance of honorariums, we have chosen not to pursue those allegations for various reasons. We've just decided this is not the case on which to pursue those grounds. Another case that may be more favorable for precedential reasons will appear. This just isn't the case for that. As to the Atlanta Next PAC, we investigated the PAC both as a PAC, and as you well know, a political action committee can also be known as a super PAC, or as we call an independent committee. We look at how you spend your money. In looking at all the bank records for Atlanta Next, there was no evidence that they were operating either as what we consider a political action committee or as an independent committee. There were some transactions to other candidates, but it did not rise to the threshold reporting level of $25,000, and we could not ascertain any independent expenditures on behalf of Mr. Mitchell's campaign, and so it was, as far as we can discern, a true leadership PAC. And then we have, of course, the failure to disclose $34,028.23 in campaign contributions. That's been removed because of the NPG data. That was the amount contained within NPG's raw data file that should have been transmitted to us, but for whatever reason did not. Now, we have stipulated violations of the Campaign Finance Act. Mr. Mitchell's campaign has agreed to stipulate that the campaign failed to disclose the payment of $8,864 in a loan that was made from Razor Consulting Group to Mr. Mitchell's campaign. Under the Campaign Finance Act, you have to keep track of your debts, and you also have to report to us when it is either paid or forgiven. For whatever reason, it wasn't tracked, it wasn't reported. It's a fairly simple violation, and for that violation, which has been corrected, a civil penalty of $300 will be paid to the commission. As to the allegation regarding late filings, as we discussed, the CCDR disappeared, it was timely filed, it was just misclassified. You have 3 personal financial disclosure statements covering calendar years 2011, 2012, and 2013. All 3 of those were late, but they were otherwise complete. There is a civil penalty of $300 that will be imposed for that, as well as $375 in late fees. Just for your background information, $125 of that late fee total has already been paid. There seems to be, surprise, surprise, a computer glitch that is inhibiting the ability to pay the other $250 before today's date, but we'll get that fixed. As far as the campaign's failure to register with us as a campaign committee before raising and expending money, that violation has been admitted and a $500 civil penalty will be imposed. That brings us to what we don't agree on. And what we don't agree on is how much money did Mr. Mitchell fail to disclose that he used for campaign expenses. Now, I've broken them up into 2 different categories. One is for general and necessary campaign expenses. Now, make no mistake, all of these expenditures are general and necessary campaign expenses. I don't think anyone would argue that having a campaign manager would be anything other than ordinary and necessary. But you'll see a little later, it made the accounting a little easier. We say that there is $71,798 and some change in general expenses, so think of campaign fundraisers, signs, buttons, those issues, campaign staffers, that were not properly reported, and that's a violation of 21.534 of 81B. You're required under that code section to report all campaign expenditures and itemize them if they are greater than $100. And you're also required to report small campaign expenditures of less than $100 when they aggregate to over $100. So if you have a Facebook subscription that you use for your advertising of your campaign and it's $50 a week, by the 3rd week you are itemizing all Facebook transactions of $50. You'll be surprised there are a number of people who still are unaware of that. As far as the campaign's consultant, we said that there was a failure to disclose $22,168 and some change to the campaign consultant. And as you can see within your actual presentation, the original allegation was $205 for the general expenses and $52,000 for the campaign consultant. Those numbers went down once the report from December was reclassified and done appropriately, and then the NPG data was finally provided. And we've already gone over the code section, which is...
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes, sir.
So on the consent order, it says he failed to disclose the final payment of approximately $8,000 in campaign debt owed to Razor Consulting.
Yes, sir. We agree on that.
You agree on that?
We agree.
So that's different than...
Completely different.
Okay, okay.
And then there's also, just so you know, there's an applicable Georgia Campaign Finance Regulation 189-3.01 governing the disclosure of expenditures. So it's not just within statute. We've clarified it to give a little more understanding to what can sometimes be murky in the code. Now turning to the weeds and the audit findings. This is the part no one likes, and this is where our dispute comes in. If you look at the consent order, we have given you a range. The range roughly says that the parties agree that the number is somewhere between $40-something thousand or 90% compliance, and we say it's up to $93,000 and a 75% compliance. In looking at the general expenses, when you look at the campaign contribution disclosure reports for general expenses, there are $258,000 and some change worth of general expenses. Of the items that were not reported, there's $71,000, which gives you a grand total of $34,700 when you add them both together. So the real number is $347,252. They reported $258. Now you see items not tracked, $16,880. That number are ghost transactions. They are transactions that exist on the campaign disclosure forms, but that do not exist in any of the bank records. Ghost transactions can be things such as you enter in a double entry when you only meant to enter it once, or you confused which campaign data you were entering, or you actually, you transpose numbers. We can't find the transaction anywhere, so we took them out. And at $16,800, that's not an uncommon thing to do with ghost transactions. It's kind of within GAAP principles for variance allowance, because no accounting is perfect. But when you look at that, you have a variance of 25%, or put it another way, the campaign was 74.46% compliant with the Campaign Finance Act. Now you have to look at the Razor Consulting expenses, which we pulled out and segregated from the general expenses. The reason we pulled them out is because there are fewer transactions to Razor Consulting than there are general expenditures. In total, if you put them all together, it's almost 1,000 transactions, line item entries. So we pulled out Razor Consulting because that's only about 50 transactions. We can audit that a lot faster than we can 980-something transactions. And when you look at what's reported on this campaign disclosures, they disclosed $74,647 of expenses to Razor Consulting. The total, according to the bank, was $96,816.58. If you just went through the bank account and looked at checks, that's how much they paid. They didn't report $22,168.97. Now that includes a 10% variance. We have allowed $2,369 for transposing errors. Now variances are generally allowed when you do reconciliation audits because even we're not perfect. You're going to sometimes transpose numbers, put in the decimal in the wrong spot. So we've put in an allowance that accounts for that. So we're not saying it's $24,537, we're saying it's $2,369. So there's a built-in buffer if there are continued disputes about, well, this one transaction for $600 was wrong. Well, it's covered by the $2,369 we've already given you as a variance. Now, this is a little trick. Yes, sir.
Can you go back to the previous screen?
Yes, sir. Oops.
Okay, so on the left-hand side for general expenditures, items not tracked, you've got 16,000.
Yes, sir.
So, but you added that into the total expenditures, is that right?
Well,
Should you have done that?
I don't know if it was that. I don't know if we necessarily added it. 58. They should have been pulled out.
Yeah. I mean, shouldn't it have been 258 plus 71, which is, what, 329?
Yes, sir. The ghost transaction should have come out.
Okay, so that would change the percentages, wouldn't it?
A little bit.
Okay, we can address that one further down the road. Okay.
A little trick to double check the math. It's something that Ms. Harper and I kind of noticed as a quick way to fact check. If you take all of the campaign disclosures and you look at only the summary pages, because we had a little bit of dispute about the less than 100 transactions. If you look at the summary pages and you add up all of the transactions that are listed both itemized and unitemized, you get the total amount of expenditures that were reported by the campaign within the body of that report. That's the second column on the right-hand side, amount reported per CCDR. Then you go to the bank account and you filter the bank account data to show only the dates that are covered by that reporting period. That gives you your other number, the amount of money actually spent by the campaign committee. That's your first column. When you subtract the second column from the first column, it allows you to determine the amount of money that was either over-reported or under-reported by the campaign. So it kind of cuts out the having to do line-by-line fighting, because you're taking everything that's in that report is true, and you're just simply saying, compared to the bank versus what you said, how much were you off by? Now, this is where it gets a little funny. The under-report is a positive number. So when you see 292.78, that is an under-report. That means you spent more money than that you disclosed. The negative number is an over-report, which means based by the bank, you disclose that you spent more than you actually did. When you add all of those numbers up, you get to $76,122.75 not reported. Now, normally that would make everyone a little happy because then you could say, well, we're done. That was easy math. The reason you can't just go with the $76,122 number is because of those lovely ghost transactions, and I'm pretty positive I didn't screw up this slide. Because those numbers, you have to add back into the $93,000. Because remember, these ghost transactions are not in the bank account. They're on the CCDR. So they are artificially suppressing that number, that's $76,000. Because remember, we took it out of the bank transaction audit because they didn't exist. You told us they existed, but they didn't. So if we leave it in and give it credit using the simple math trick I have, it makes that number artificially suppressed to 76, when it really should be 93, 967, 92. When you compare our line-by-line audit, which shows $93,026.59, and you do the simple math trick, $93,967.92. That's a 1% variance of $941.33. It's the way, it's how we double check ourselves to make sure we're not just totally missing transactions everywhere. And I have to give a little bit of credit to IAG Forensics. That's a forensic accounting firm that we used to always deal with. So, you know, that's how we learn the trick. Now going into the actual, to give you kind of the details, the disputes have been far-ranging and they have been quite long on what the line-by-line audit should say. The expenditures to Razor Consulting, since there were only 50 transactions, were fairly quick, and I'm going to concentrate on those. If you look at the campaign contribution disclosure report for March 31st, 2013, you can see where what was disclosed by the campaign was $10,358. What was actually spent was $11,542, a difference of $1,184. And those are the checks. And then same thing with June 30th, 2013. What is reported by the campaign is $6,000. What is actually spent is $13,000, which is negative $7,000. It's an underreport. The expenses on October 25, 2013, this is the report that has the computer data, which is why you have computer data on the right-hand side and not one of our reports. Same thing. There was the data according to the third-party vendor was that the campaign spent $6,900. They actually spent $7,600. It's a negative $661. And those are the checks that correspond to it. The expenditures here on 12/31/2013, as you can see, we weren't looking to make Mr. Mitchell's life unbearable. We actually gave $2,250 worth of credit to an entry that was listed as only $250. We did that numerous times where it looked like they just left off a zero, or they added too many zeros. We gave them the credit of what was in the bank account and not on the report. So that was to Mr. Mitchell's benefit of $2,250. But even adding in that benefit, there's a negative $4,038.23. Now, Mr. Mitchell's campaign says that $4,000 went to campaign staffers and interns, namely Jody Maraday and Kay Austin. When you actually pull apart their disclosures, that doesn't wash that explanation. For example, to Mr. or Miss Maraday, there are 6 disclosed transactions, which total $13,200. There are actual 7 checks made payable by Caesar Mitchell's campaign of $16,450. If you take the campaign's word that there was an additional 8th check, that would take the total to $19,700. So it would actually increase the amount of non-reporting. Same thing for Mr. Austin. Even if the campaign is correct, it's $600. It's covered by our variance. And then it just continues on down the list. For June 30th, 2012, the total reported was $1,750 out of $6,400. It's a negative $46.53. And it just keeps going, so I'm not going to bug y'all with it anymore. But the summary of the violations is there's a failure to disclose 11 expenditures to Razor Consulting Group from January 2012 to December of 2013, totaling $22,168.97. For the general expenses, there are 173 transactions not disclosed, totaling $71,798.95, which gives you a total of $93,967.92. All of these disclosures span 15 different campaign contribution disclosure reports from June 2011 to January 2016. Every report has got problems in it, some more so than others. Now, the proposed resolution we have, this is where we really come into dispute. As the Commission knows, you have the power to punish through the issuance of civil penalties, same thing fines, that's 215614 CI, little I. What it states is that for each violation contained in any report, the maximum fine is $1,000 that you're authorized to impose. For each similar transaction, not the same transaction, but similar transaction, you're able to increase the fine to $10,000 for the subsequent and $25,000 for each and every one thereafter. With over 180 different transactions, that would get draconian really quick. And we've never asked for any kind of penalties like that to ever be imposed. Just so you quickly know, the agreed upon terms are the $300 or the $600 in civil penalties for the smaller violations, $500 in civil penalties for that failure to register the campaign commission or campaign committee. What we are looking for now for the remaining thing that we have outstanding is we're looking for a civil penalty of $18,300 for the failure to disclose the $71,000 in general expenses. That penalty would be less than 25.5% of the non-disclosed amount. And I'll come back to those percentages in just a second. As to the $5,600 for failing to disclose, or we're looking for $5,600 in civil penalties for the failure to disclose $22,168.97. That's also less than 25.5% of the amount not disclosed. So the total penalty would be $23,900, or if you want to think about it per report, $1,593.33 per report that has errors contained within it. Now, what has the Commission done in the past? Because we're trying to keep everything and treat everyone in similar situations as similarly as possible. We have two cases that have come before you recently that are fairly close to each other. The first is Michael Julian Bond, and Mr. Bond was assessed a $45,000 civil penalty. Now, you have to break his out because he had some other violations that Mr. Mitchell did not. In looking at just the failure to file campaign expenses and campaign contributions, he paid an $18,500 fine, which was approximately 33% of the non-disclosed total. In the matter of Mr. Smith, he paid an $8,000 civil penalty. Now, he had a number of violations too. Now, for the failure to file the 6 CCDRs, that composed about $1,800 of his civil penalty. And the reason I know that's because I drafted his order, and I'm the one who ran through the actual punishment of him. The failure to disclose the real estate holdings was $200 of that penalty. The failure to disclose 34 contributions was $7,500. And then, or it's actually combined with the $25,000, so it's roughly $30,000. He paid a $6,000 penalty. That was 18% of the non-disclosed total. So you've got a range of between 33% and 18% of the non-disclosed total is where you have assessed your fines to try to keep everyone kind of similar situated punished. What would the penalty be if you followed these two precedents? Exactly. Well, it would be $23,700 for the campaign expenses. That'd be 33% of the non-disclosed total. $7,300 for the $22,000 the campaign consultant, also 33%. A total penalty of $31,000, or per report, $2,066 and some change per report. If you followed Mr. Smith's case exactly and did 18%, it would be a total penalty of $16,900 or $1,126 per report. Now, we've looked at this case and we think that Mr. Mitchell, based on actions taken by his staff, as well as the way this case has progressed, and the fact we're here before you today with preliminary hearing, warrant an amount higher than 18%. But I'd submit to you that it should not be lower than 18%. Mr. Smith was a less sophisticated candidate. He did not have a campaign staff. He did not have very esteemed counsel. He did not have a very well-paid campaign manager. It was basically him, as I jokingly say, his shoebox, where he kept all of his receipts. Mr. Smith's campaign had cash on hand of about $5,000 when the commission imposed its penalty. So it imposed a penalty greater than what his campaign could afford to pay. He had to pay out of pocket. Mr. Mitchell, on the other hand, is a sophisticated candidate. with very good campaign staff, a very good campaign manager, and very good legal counsel. He also, as of the last reporting period, had raised over $1.2 million. And I'm willing to bet that the amount of money raised that will be disclosed at the end of this month will go higher. So allegations of I can't afford it, I don't think necessarily should be entertained. Now, why should you continue to utilize a percentage method as opposed to deviating from what you've done in the past? There are a number of reasons. The first one is that the commission avoids the appearance of political favoritism. If everyone's punished basically by a percentage of how they do not disclose, you don't have the problem. You also avoid actual political favoritism, which no one here has done in the almost 3 years I've been here, but that's just another reason to do it. It also ensures that you are treating cases and respondents as fairly and similarly situated as possible. Because you're not saying, well, on this one case, because they've hired, good counsel, and they actually have some nice excuses, we're going to give them a slap on the wrist and wish them well. But someone less sophisticated, which Mr. Smith did have counsel, but someone less sophisticated is punished more harshly, even though the amount of monies and violations are somewhat more minimal. It also, by using the range of percentage, it allows the commission to punish people for kind of a mens rea element. One reason Mr. Bond's percentage was so much higher than Mr. Smith's is because the commission felt that he had more of a mental culpability element to his violations than Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith really, he's just a really bad accountant. Whereas Mr. Bond, I'm sure you're all familiar with the hearing, it was a little more contentious. But also by allowing the range, the commission has the ability to show lenience for respondents who are worthy of compassion and that leniency. For example, when Mr. Smith comes in, and I think every time he came to this hearing, he said, yep, I made mistakes, I promise I'll get right on that, I'll fix it, just let me survive legislative session. And true to his word, his lawyer called me the week after legislative session and he resolved the case. I mean, he couldn't have been more cooperative. And to punish him more severely than 18% wouldn't have been just, and that's what y'all found. So that's basically our explanation in a nutshell.
All right, thank you very much. So you took about 34 minutes. I'll give y'all extra time if you like. Yeah, go ahead. What number are you?
Mr. Lane,
Yes,
could
sir.
you remind us, the panel, of the procedural characterization of Bond and Smith cases? Some of that was negotiated as well, was it not?
Some of Mr. Bond's, I believe, was negotiated. It was a partial consent. Mr. Smith was a full consent.
So the numbers were reached by consent in Smith's case.
Yes, sir. In Mr. Smith's case, the number not disclosed as well as the penalty amount was by agreement.
And remind me of Bond, was it the amount penalty reached by agreement as well?
I believe so.
Okay.
I think the dispute was how he paid it. It was the actual dispute they had.
All right, Mr. Strickland, Ms. Lewis.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Frank Strickland, and my partner Ann Lewis. Together we represent Caesar Mitchell and his campaign. I want to note for all of you that I want to compliment your staff. They proceeded in a professional, proper, and courteous manner at all times. We've had a number of face-to-face meetings. We make available all the documents that were requested at our office, and Mr. Lane and at least one or two members of the staff came to our office and spent the better part of a day reviewing those records. So any record that's been requested, we've produced it. And as Mr. Lane outlined, there's been extensive effort to try to, and you saw throughout the discussion, the number shrunk. So we begin by saying that with respect to the contributions over a 5-year period, there was no finding of failure to report almost every dollar of contributions. It got down in $1 million campaign that around $600 either wasn't correctly reported, but it's almost to the penny. So that seems to me evidence of strong intent by the campaign to do proper and complete reporting. So these are administrative mistakes. There's no intentional failure to disclose, because it seems illogical you report every penny of your contributions and then decide, well, I'm going to try to deceive the commission and not report certain amounts. So these were administrative mistakes, and there's no deliberate intent to not disclose these items on time. And Mr. Lane mentioned that, well, and we've really boiled this thing down to a pretty straightforward consent order where every single item has been agreed upon. But also, we can report that all contributions and expenditures now have been fully reported to the penny. All the bank accounts have been reconciled to the penny. There's no missing money or anything of the sort. There have been no expenditures of a personal nature. All the campaign expenditures that have been reported were deemed by the commission to be allowable under the law. So that's not a factor here. Mr. Lane mentioned there were 15 reports over the 2011-2016 period, and that there were violations on every one of those reports. That is not correct. There were 5 reports on which there were 0 violations. So it is a mistake to say to the commission that there was a violation on 15 reports. Instead, there were 10. So in approaching, we boiled this down to a range. We spent an inordinate amount of time trying to boil these numbers down, and the campaign believes that its number is correct, $46,900 roughly. We understand that the commission believes its numbers are correct. So somewhere in between there, we finally just agreed to stop working on the numbers. Even though we might, if we spent several more weeks boiling down the disparity, we might have gotten it to 0, just like was the case with the contributions. There was really 0 variation on what was reported and what the records showed. So we discussed a range and decided to present the range of commission's numbers and the campaign numbers, which are on page 2 of the consent order. So the range there is about $47,000. So we proposed that by consent that the penalty should be $3,000, which was actually based on erroneous information. We took the number of 15 reports on which there were violations and multiplied it by $200, equals $3,000. The response of the staff, as recently as yesterday, was a $12,000 penalty based on $800 per report. So just in the past 24 hours, we discovered that out of the 15 reports, 5 of them had 0 violations. So our range then was really too high. It would have been 10 reports times $200 equals $2,000, and the commission, in calculating a proposed penalty of $800 per report, instead of 15 reports, it would be 10 reports times $800, or $8,000. So we are quite surprised to hear the presentation this morning based on percentages. I understand that the commission has used percentages in the past, but I want the commission to know that as recently as yesterday, the proposal was $800 per report, and we are stating in our place that 5 reports had 0 violations. They were absolutely complete, so those should be off the table. Ms. Lewis may have a couple of other points she wants to add, so I'm going to give her that opportunity.
I don't have much to add, Commissioners. Good morning. I did want to say, though, in response to Mr. Lane's suggestion that Mr. Mitchell's campaign is much bigger and therefore he can afford it, Well, that's also the case in a much bigger campaign. You're going to have many more transactions. And that happened in this campaign. When we were looking at it in this case, we got a complaint that alleged violations over the course of 5 years. And yes, we were happy to resolve over half of those with the finding that there was no there. But when it came down to reconciling these expenditures, you're looking at 5 years of a big campaign. And I do want to note for the record too that once everything was reported, there was nothing that wasn't an allowable campaign expenditure. And I think Mr. Lane started off his presentation by saying this whole thing got started by the staff reading in the newspaper that perhaps there were campaign expenditures not being properly made by various candidates. He certainly didn't mention Mr. Mitchell, but as the impetus for beginning this complaint, which was filed by the commission. So I want to note that on the one hand, a big campaign has a lot of money, but on the other hand, a big campaign has a lot of transactions too, and a lot more chance for mistakes to be made. And you know, we now have been through 3 different audits, and Mr. Strickland said we finally just said we can't agree on the numbers. Well, we didn't say that until the day before yesterday when we met with the staff for yet another time to try to see if we could make the numbers come together. And I do think there's been significant work by both the staff and the respondent to try to get this number to work. But at the end of the day, where we're left is we are probably not going to come together because we think they're double counting some things, they think they aren't. And so what we talked about and what Mr. Lane talked about in terms of a creative solution is to bring it to you rather than to go to OSA and say, okay, let's spend 6 more months or another year trying to reconcile between $46,000 and $93,000. Let's just say that we can't agree, it's somewhere in between, and ask the commission to set the penalty, because ultimately the commission will do that anyway. I was also shocked to hear a number almost double than the number we heard yesterday in terms of a penalty and a percentage. And with respect to Mr. Smith's case and Mr. Bond's case, first of all, those are extremely different facts from this case. And you know, 2 cases, this doesn't seem to make a sample set to me. I mean, those are 2 cases in which the penalties were quite high. And I know that's why Mr. Lane would like to use those, but with regard to Commissioner Cathy's point, they were also agreed upon by those respondents who had not only not reported some expenditures, but had not filed a lot of reports and had used campaign money for personal expenses, none of which exist here. And so I think where we're left today is really we're asking the commission to approve this consent order with the range stated in it and with a fine that is not $23,900, but somewhere between the $3,000 that we had offered, and if you take that the commission staff said yesterday, a fine of $800 per wrong report, that would be 800 times 10 or 8,000, so somewhere between 3,000 and 8,000. I don't want to minimize the fact that most of the allegations in this case were resolved because it took a lot of work to get there. And so while yes, we're glad that you don't have to consider those because we were able to resolve those with the staff in Mr. Mitchell's favor, that did take work to get to that point. And so insofar as Mr. Mitchell may have a healthy financial, the finances in his campaign may be healthy, you know, this complaint with lots of allegations, many of which are withdrawn, has affected the health of that those finances. So with that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Strickland if he has anything to say.
Well, does the commission have any questions for us? We'll be glad to try to answer them if you do have such questions.
Yeah, I think if y'all are done, we'll move to the questions. period. We can ask questions of either side, so everyone chime in. Okay.
I want to applaud all of you first for working together, and Mr. Glenn is correct. It does take a lot of work on both sides to have these consent orders. It sounds as if at this point you're purely stuck on a number. Is that correct? And that would be the civil penalty.
That's correct. That's
Okay.
the only remaining item.
Okay, that was my first question. My second question is that you indicated that all of the expenditures that were not reported, the 184, are allowable campaign expenditures under the act. That is y'all's position.
It's not only our position, but the staff agrees with it.
And that was going to be my next question. Do you agree with that, Mr. Lane?
There was nothing that we saw that was an impermissible expense.
Okay, so nothing was an impermissible expense under the act. All of the 184 violations are purely a failure to report, not a violation of the Campaign Finance Act from an expenditure standpoint, other than the failure to report, correct?
Correct. That's one reason we've always maintained that Mr. Mitchell's closer to the Ernest Smith case where it was no impermissible expense, and not to Mr. Bond's where there were impermissible expenses.
Okay, those are all the questions I have at this time.
Mr. Lane,
Hold on.
what is your response to Mr. Strickland's position that 5 of the reports contained no violation, only 10, not 15 reports?
Honestly, I would have to go back and look at our audit and pull the transactions and filter them, because there are almost 1,000 transactions
Yeah.
over 15 reports.
But you're not prepared to dispute that right now?
I'm not prepared to dispute it, because I think I would encourage the commission to look at the amount of money that's not disclosed, because the amount of money gives you the level of compliance. We're arguing between 75% and 90%. So if it's somewhere in the middle, it might be in the 80s.
I understand that, but some of, and I don't ever want anybody, there's a very laudable rule in Georgia that settlements are encouraged, and I don't want anybody's negotiations to be held against them. But isn't some of the discussions about the amount of fine have something to do with the amount of violations, not the amount of money?
To an extent, I would disagree with Mr. Strickland in his characterization that we have never discussed a percentage of the non-disclosure until yesterday, because I've never discussed negotiations, because I don't consider that to be helpful in a contested
I
setting.
agree.
But it's generally you don't discuss them. We've actually discussed with Mr. Strickland that if they had accepted our proposal, the percentage would have been less than 18%. So to us, if you have to hold a respondent's feet to the fire, if they choose not to accept a better offer than what is sought at trial, that's kind of on them. They should have accepted the lesser percentage. If you,
And that's a legitimate way to conduct your, attempt to reconcile the case.
Yes, sir.
The second question is, I assume both parties do not desire to go farther with the OSHA hearing, is that?
we have other things that we can concentrate on than spending 2 days going through 1,000 transactions. I will be quite candid with the commission that because the favorite statement has been that we've gone through 3 audits. Well, the first audit was based on records produced to us. The second audit was done on records produced to us subsequent to the first batch. The third audit was on even more records produced to us. So it's not that we can't count. It's simply we didn't have the records to plug them in, and we gave credit where appropriate. Once we have now done it 3 times, we have subsequently been given 2 separate, I call them notes, they're not audits, by Mr. Mitchell's staff, where they have highlighted their numbers and say, if you count this, 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 and this as double counts, the number drops. We've looked at all of those. We went through the 1,000 transactions again, twice. They're not double counted. What you're generally seeing in his campaign is the staff for them is saying, oh, well, this transaction is disclosed, you'll see it right here. Well, yes, that one transaction out of 3 is disclosed, we're punishing you for the other 2. Or this transaction is disclosed, well, yes, it is, but there's another identical transaction. One that sticks out in my mind is a Delta Airlines expense. As everyone who's bought a ticket knows, they charge you twice, one for each ticket. So they break it up into 2 transactions. They disclosed one, but not the other. So that's why they got, that's why the number seems to go down with Mr. Mitchell's notes, is because we're not double counting you, we're just not giving you double credit. So that's why I think that's one reason we dug our heels in so much on the number itself, and we can't reach agreement.
Go ahead.
I also don't want to focus too much on what negotiations took place. I'm not sure that's necessarily fair in this circumstance, but I am curious also as to the staff's position on the number of reports, whether it would be 10 or 15. I guess my question for you, Mr. Strickland, would be, originally you said that the negotiations that you were undertaking, were based on $200 times 15 reports. And
That was a mistake.
well, my question, I guess, is what changed, between yesterday and today? Because it sounded like to me from yesterday, you were still making your proposal based on $200 and 15 reports. And
Correct.
today, you're telling us there's only 10. When did you discover there were only 10 reports?
Yesterday. I discovered that yesterday. I said, it suddenly came to my mind, okay, was there an instance where there were, of the 15 reports on which there were 0 violations on a particular report? And the answer was 5, with 0 violations. And I also want to point out to the commission that all those reports were filed. It was just sloppy accounting practices that caused a failure to disclose some of the amounts that should have been disclosed. At the same time, almost every dollar down to the penny of contributions were reported. So we can't explain the administrative errors that caused these items not to be reported, but as Mr. Lane explained, once they were reported, they were all determined to be allowable under the Act. Not a single one is in a category that's not allowable.
So, Mr. Strickland and Ms. Lewis, I have in my notes that you all are saying it's roughly $47,000 that you believe was not reported, and that staff is saying roughly $94,000 is not reported. Is that correct?
Not reported timely, but it has now been fully reported.
Correct,
Every
correct.
dollar for the Mitchell campaigns over those 5 years has been fully reported to the
Correct.
commission.
So, why the difference in, how did you come up with, is my question, the roughly 47,000?
Well,
Not to go, you don't need to belabor it, but.
yeah, I don't want to go quite as far down into the weeds. I'm not sure I can explain how we got to that number, but our campaign consultant and auditors and so on have done their review of the reporting and concluded that everything was reported as indicated on the second, under respondents' calculations. I don't know exactly how we got there, just like I don't know exactly how Mr. Lane got to his number. So we finally decided, look, we could spend the rest of the year trying to boil that number down, and we thought that would not be productive. So we stopped and said we're going to present both positions to the commission. And again, I emphasize, when we say total amount unreported, it wasn't timely reported, but it has now been fully reported.
So I'd like to ask Mr. Lane about, or do you want to respond to that?
There are actually 2 things that I'd like the commission to
Go
look
ahead.
at. As far as the timely reporting, the amendments to Mr. Mitchell's campaign did not occur until we provided his campaign with our audit of the 1,000 transactions, or 987 transactions. They weren't done organically before we got to them. They were done based off our numbers. And so, yeah, they are correct now because they track our audit. As I'm a little surprised by Mr. Strickland's assertion that he doesn't know how we got to our numbers. We have provided all 3 audits, all 987 transactions, detailing everything that is properly accounted, everything that's properly not accounted, the ghost transactions in detail. In response to our request to explain to us the discrepancy, we have never received an audit from Mr. Mitchell's campaign. We have received notes on our audit saying disclosed, disclosed, under threshold, And we have gone through all of those notes now twice for the better part of 3 days. And they're just simply not there because they're not looking at all 987 transactions. They're boiling it down to the 173 and saying, but it appears here. Well, yeah, it appears here, but it appears in 35 other places too. You've got to account for those other 35. You actually have 40 transactions. You missed the other 5. That's why we have such a differing opinion. If you give the double credit, you get down to 46.
So it seems like to me this case has a lot of similarities with Representative Smith's case.
It does.
And that there was perhaps no ill intent, no laws were violated in terms of actual expenditures, but there was a serious reporting mistakes were made.
Jokingly, without going into negotiations, I've always joked that to look at Mr. Smith's case, I've been as transparent about that as possible. But we've never said that it was closer to Mr. Collins' case.
Okay, and so you say here that
Oh, and I'm sorry, the other thing just popped into my head. I think one of the issues on just focusing on how many reports had errors in them isn't necessarily a good path for the commission to take. I'd be kind of scared of y'all deviating, simply because, for example, how would you punish an individual, just with a hypothetical of, they didn't disclose $50,000 worth of their transactions in 2 reports, but the rest of them were fine. Well, the rest of them really aren't fine because of the carry forward function. If you have sufficient errors in this 1 or 2 report, the subsequent ones really aren't worth the paper they're printed on, because the numbers are horribly skewed. That's how you have cases that come before you. You're going to have one next quarter where the person's reported $713 cash on hand. They really have between $55,000 and $60,000.
okay,
Yeah.
but going back to the Smith thing, so you're recommending $23,900 in penalties.
Yes, sir.
But then in the slide here of what would penalty be if followed similar cases for the Smith one, you say $16,900.
Yes, sir.
So that's a difference of $7,000 more here, applying the same standard. So how do you justify that, given that this is similar to the Smith case?
The way I justify it is in the way that the parties conducted their litigation. Mr. Smith did not make us do 5 audits. He did not make us review, 2 edits multiple times. We have spent weeks and months reconciling line by line to get an accurate number. Additionally, Mr. Smith, I don't want to say he was contrite, that's not kind of the word I'm looking for, but he was eager to resolve his case. He realized the problems were there, and he was very cordial in the way he went about resolving it. For example, when I asked for records, they were promptly produced. In Mr. Mitchell's case, we fought over the production of records for months on end. There were actually threats of, if we don't get the records, we're just going to go to the bank, or we'll do a motion to compel. In fact, there are even some records that have still not been disclosed that were subpoenaed. We chose simply to move on from those records as opposed to bogging down the case in litigation that would drag on for years.
What records were those?
For example, Mr. Mitchell's personal records, there are a number of reimbursements that are made to Mr. Mitchell for, basically I would assume it's a personal credit card. Not all of the transactions line up, but it's a small enough amount that we find that it wouldn't be worth the commission's resources to pursue it further, if that makes sense. Also for, this is one of our big problems, we subpoenaed the records of Razor Consulting Group. The reason we did that is because a lot of campaign consultants will front load expenses for their candidates. They'll say, you pay me $10,000 for this month, $2,000 of that is my fee, the remainder of the $10,000, $8,000, I'm going to buy your campaign signs, your buttons, your staffers, on down the list. One-stop shopping. We asked for those records because we were wondering if that was some of the expenditures to Razor versus general expense problem. In September, during the notice of inspection, Ms. Carter said, I do not front load expenses. That's not proper. Last month, she changed her tune. I front load expenses to interns. Well, we can't verify that because you refuse to give us your records, so we can say, yeah, you did get paid, $4,000 from the campaign, you kept 2 and you paid 2 out to the interns. So it's, there are differences. I'm not saying Mr. Mitchell's, council or his campaign did ill will or they stole money or subsidized lifestyle. I'm not saying any of that. But they were more litigious than Mr. Smith, and that explains the difference in percentage. It's higher than Mr. Smith.
Okay.
That's the difference in our minds.
So Mr. Strickland, would you like to respond to that? Also, if you care, why do you think this is different? I mean, you may not be familiar with the Smith case, but why, if you are, why do you think it necessitates a lower penalty?
Ms. Lewis.
I'll answer that first, Mr. Chairman. As I said before, basically, we've got, two consent orders here, Michael Julian Bond and Ernest Smith, and in my clicking through various orders of the commission, those were the biggest bonds I could find by far. I don't think it's similar to the Ernest Smith case, because I'm listening to Mr. Lane, and I'm looking at the first thing on his chart here is failure to file 6 CCDRs, $1,800. Well, that's $300 a piece. So we would have been better off if we just didn't file anything, rather than file things that had mistakes on them. Because while it's $300 a report if you just don't file it, he wants 18% of what you forgot or didn't get on your report. And I will say that, to the extent that there were any non-allowable expenses, that might change our position on that, but there weren't. As between Michael Julian Bond and Ernest Smith, I realize they're consent orders, so one of them agreed to 18%, one of them agreed to 33%, but that doesn't really establish a precedent for the commission. That's a consent order that the commission accepted, but it seems to me that I want to address for a minute Mr. Lane's distinction between this case and Mr. Smith's case. He said, first of all, Mr. Smith didn't make us do 5 audits. Mr. Mitchell didn't make the commission staff do 5 audits either. The commission staff elected to bring a complaint that had about 12 allegations against Mr. Mitchell. And a lot of those were disposed of after a lot of work and were unfounded. And so the commission staff Mr. Mitchell didn't cause 5 audits. Secondly, that Mr. Smith was eager to resolve his case. Mr. Mitchell has been very eager to resolve his case, has spent a lot of time and money trying to do that. And, it sounds like Mr. Lane is saying to some extent you should penalize Mr. Mitchell because he did retain counsel. He has done audits, whereas Mr. Smith didn't have the ability to do all that. And I don't know if he did or he didn't. I think Mr. Lane then backed up and said Mr. Smith actually did have counsel. I don't think it's the same as the Ernest Smith case, number one, because Ernest Smith agreed to that penalty, and it wasn't that the commission picked that penalty. Ernest Smith agreed to it. But also because Mr. Mitchell did not totally fail to file 6 campaign reports. And then when I looked at the order on Mr. Smith's case, they were during election years. So I think that is a big distinction between that case and this one. And I do want to address Mr. Lane's notion that records weren't promptly produced. What Mr. Lane was asking for was bank records with checks, with personal information from contributors on them. And there was some negotiation about how those were going to be produced in order to protect the privacy of the contributors. The records from Razor Consulting, Mr. Lane issued a subpoena, and Razor Consulting, Ms. Keisha Carter, she responded to it saying what records she had. He's suggesting today that she had other records intern records that she didn't produce, but I don't think she ever said she had records of those. I think she said that's what happened to the money. And so with that, I think that we have tried, and the staff has tried to come up with what the number is. Maybe it was for a percentage, maybe that was Mr. Lane's intention, but that wasn't his intention yesterday when he sent the $12,000 suggestion and said what that would amount to is $800 per report. That was wrong.
Mr. Evans.
As Commissioner Adams said, we appreciate you guys and your time today, and you trying to work this out, resolving the number of issues that you have resolved. It looks to me that there's three big questions. The first one is the amount that wasn't reported, and it just doesn't seem to me like you guys are going to resolve that between the 47 and 90, however, $1,000. How to determine the penalty, whether it's based upon the report or based upon the total amount that wasn't reported. And if it is based upon the total amount, what percentage? And so, Mr. Strickland and Ms. Lewis, I asked you guys, we've gotten Mr. Lane's proposal that it should be 25% of the total amount, not the report. So my question to you guys is, should it be based upon the report, which you allege is only 10 reports that were improperly submitted? And if so, why? If it shouldn't be based upon the report, if it should be based upon the overall number, what percentage do you propose? Because I assume that the 25.5% isn't proper, because even assuming the 47,000 that you allege was improperly reported, that would bring it to around 12,000. You said that that wasn't yesterday acceptable, so you didn't accept it.
I think your first point is correct, Commissioner, and we're not going to reach an agreement on the amount unreported. How to determine the penalty? I don't know that it certainly doesn't appear set in stone that the Commission applies a percentage. In fact, these two cases are vastly different in percentage, but they were consent. Because I don't know how you would set that percentage. As I said, 2 does not a sample set make. I don't know how you would set it, and so I would set it per report. And I would not make it more punitive than completely failing to file the report. It seems like if you file the report and you list 300 transactions and you leave 15 off, that shouldn't be a bigger fine than if you just don't ever file a report. And I think it also, if you apply a percentage, and as we discussed, I mean, it is probably the case that in a bigger campaign with more contributions and more expenditures, there's more opportunity for things to go unreported, not intentionally, but just because of the number of transactions. And so if you apply a percentage, the bigger campaign is always going to be paying more. And I don't know that you should be punished because you have a bigger campaign. So my recommendation would be per report rather than percentage, because I don't know how you come up with a percentage. I don't think you can base it on these two.
And further, there's no suggestion of percentage in the statute. How can people be on notice that the Commission's in the percentage business when the law doesn't contemplate that?
But if you look at the statute, it's draconian, and you can do $25,000 for every.
I get that.
I mean,
You could get up to $1 million if you just started stacking up what the statute allows. And I would suggest to you that no legislator voted for a statute that would authorize stacking that could yield $1 million penalty.
And Commissioners, you know, in the 3 years I've been here and Ms. Wetzel have been here, we've never done that. In fact, we discussed when we first started handling these cases back in 2014 that the Commission would punish more sophisticated candidates with higher penalties. That it was not fair or equitable to go after someone from Brooklet, Georgia with a $500 campaign account and punish them with thousands of dollars for fines. But in the reverse, it's not fair to punish someone with a multi-million-dollar campaign with a $500 fine, because they have the resources to comply with the act, whereas the guy from Brooklet does not. And that is something we talked about at quite length, and it made Mr. Douglas-Chalmers a little unhappy. You might remember that. But that's how it's proceeded. Now, as far as just doing reports, I don't want to do a parade of horribles, but you can have reports where the vast majority are contained in one report, and then you get the alternative where, yeah, they didn't disclose $50,000, so we're only going to punish them $500. But someone who didn't disclose $10,000 but had it on 10 reports, we're going to make them pay $35,000. You can't. The percentage cuts out the parade of horribles of, well, it was all on one report as opposed to 10. It's really a numbers game. And it's not just a big percentage. You have to look at the percentage of compliance. It's 75 to 90%. So, I mean, if you're going to take their argument that it's somewhere in the middle, it's going to be in the 20s or the high teens and as far as compliance. That goes with the penalty of how do you impose. And we're not just pulling percentages out of thin air. And I know, I appreciate Ms. Lewis's argument of we shouldn't have just filed the reports if this is how you're going to punish us. But we also look at those penalties based on non-compliance. For example, if you have the guy from Brooklet who didn't file 6 reports, but it's a $500 disclosure once and then a carry forward, he's punished about $350. So that's an even bigger percentage, but it's not perfect, is I guess what I'm trying to
The
say.
question I have for you guys is if we do it per report, what is your recommendation? They're proposing $1,593.33.
Well, let me say first, Commissioner, that I didn't say we should just not file the report. That was not my position, and I think that's a misstatement, and I would not say that. The law requires us to file the reports. With respect to per report, you know, I think our position is that yesterday it was acceptable to have $800 per report. We suggested $300 per report, and so perhaps the middle ground is what the commission should impose.
I've got
Go ahead, Dennis.
observations. Mr. Lane, I want to commend you on the job you've done on this.
Thank you, sir.
Remarkably difficult. I want to commend the respondents for the cooperation. I'm reminded of a couple of things. We're in a mediation where we're reaching an impasse, and somebody has to make a decision. And when we came on the commission, they didn't tell us it would be math. But there is math, and I had never consciously made a decision about a fine based on any kind of percentage. I think it's a wonderful tool for the commission staff to use to make as a commencing point in negotiations. And I think it's a nice way to try to treat people the same. By the same token, I'm reminded of how non-effective sometimes mandatory minimums are in court. The fact finder has no discretion. And I hope that this commission can avoid the appearance of political favoritism or the actual political favoritism without the necessity of having a percentage matrix. But those are really good points about how we try to treat people similarly. Every case is different. It's human beings. It's big campaigns, little campaigns, and we've got to come up with some number. I guess I'm going to now do what's equivalent to the Allen charge or the dynamite charge. Are you sure the negotiations are at an impasse and you can't go any further?
We certainly can't go up to, you never want to say never, but I don't know, but if the commission, if the staff is insisting on some number north of what they proposed yesterday, doubling it as a matter of fact, and of course that's just beyond the pale.
But having heard your position on that, I recommend that we take a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break and make a motion to do that, Mr. Chairman.
I second that. We don't have to vote to take a break. We'll take a break. We'll be back in 10
I
minutes.
encourage these three wonderful attorneys to talk some more.
Thank you. Thank you,
They're
sir.
still negotiating, so we're going to let them negotiate, and we're going to move to the next item on the agenda, which is in the matter of Norman and Garrett. Ms. Wetzel and Mr. Garrett?
Yes, this
Okay.
is Commissioner Garrett. Commissioners, this is case number 2013-0053 in the matter of Norman Garrett. Today we have with us respondent Norman Garrett. The complainant is not present in this matter. The complaint was filed by Jimmy Richardson on December 17th, 2013. At that time, respondent was a candidate for Monroe City Council. The allegations in the complaint were that he failed to file a personal financial disclosure statement in violation of 21-5-50, and he failed to file CCDRs in violation of OCGA 21-5-34. The allegations were substantiated during the investigation of the complaint, and also an additional allegation was discovered during the investigation in that the respondent's first expenditure was made on April 24, 2013, and he did not file a declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions as required by OCGA 21-5-30G. So he has paid some late fees. However, he has one remaining outstanding late fee of $125. So today we are here. He would like to have an opportunity to speak about some hardships that he has suffered that he brought up recently. And I would ask that if we cannot come to a resolution today, that you would find that he failed to file a June 30th, 2013 CCDR in violation of OCGA 21-5-34, and he failed to file a September 30th, 2013 CCDR in violation of OCGA 21-5-34, and he failed to file an October 25th, 2013 CCDR in violation of OCGA 21-5-34, and that he also failed to file a declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions for the 2013 election in violation of OCGA 21-5-30G. But at this time, I'm going to let Mr. Garrett have an opportunity to speak unless you have any questions for me.
I do.
Yes, please.
In reviewing the materials, it appears that Mr. Garrett has a potential hardship. Has a hardship been filed?
It has not. We discussed on the phone how he needed to send an email or some kind of material outlining what his hardship may be, and he provided the email. I also stated at that time he needed to provide some documentation, like a tax return showing that maybe he didn't have the employment or they have no income coming into their family, and that was not provided.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have right now.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Garrett?
Yeah, we're dealing with and me and Becky had talked about this, we're dealing with a 2013 issue. At the time I actually ran for seat, I lost my job and really have been unemployed since on an everyday basis. And even when they submitted paperwork for me about paying $375. I did pay the $375. What I find is unusual is for this to come back up almost 4 years later saying that I failed to pay whatever whatever she may be reading off in there. But when they actually sent the paperwork out, I think I agreed that I did file some paperwork late. That's the reason I actually submitted the payment to go ahead and get it out the way. And to find that this coming up almost 4 years later, kind of not really understanding what's going on. The whole campaign, and I did file a disclosure as far as what they were trying to get me to file. I just filed it late. Is that correct?
You filed a December 31st, 2013 disclosure that disclosed what the reports, the 3 prior reports would have had on them. However, you never filed the 3 prior reports, although the information was disclosed on your December report that was filed on time.
And that's the point I will be making. I did not file them on time, but in my December report, I actually did take care of all of the reports coming up to December. And I did pay the $375, so I don't understand what would I be actually asking to pay additional $300, the whole campaign, what roughly $2,100?
I can't recall the amount of money that you spent in your campaign.
And I'm assuming it's around $2,100 from just off the top of my head, and I hadn't looked at it in a couple of days. But I'm asking that you would actually waive the fees. And I want to say, what what you actually pay, 425 or something similar to that. Because I actually don't have a job as other than working in city council. And our city council not like Atlanta City Council. We actually getting beans and not really money to actually do our job. So we would respectfully ask you to waive the fees, because even at paying those fees, that put the pay almost half of what my campaign actually ran in 2013. It would put it at roughly, and I thank you for actually dropping it, because the initial fees were gonna be $600.
Negotiations.
And she kind of dropped it down to 3 plus 125. Or either way it go, I ain't got the money to pay either one of them. So 600 or 400, stay the same, ain't a big difference.
Just, if I may clarify, just 2 points. What he's referring to about that he paid the late fees, a notice of late fees was sent to him in 2014 or 2015. I apologize for not knowing the exact date. And on that notice of late fees, it said you owe $375, and he did remit the payment for that. However, during the investigation of this complaint, because he accepted his first contribution in April, he should have filed a June 30th report. Because he didn't file a declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions, which is what we enter into our computer system to trigger the first report date. Because it was never filed and it was never entered into our system, then our system believed that the first report he should have filed was the September 30th report, because that's when he qualified for office. So it wasn't until examining his December 31st report that it could be seen that he in fact should have filed a June 30th report, because he had expenditures and contributions in April. So that's where the additional $125 late fee comes in, that was not included in the original notice of late fees.
And let me tell you why that is. I didn't think me paying for my own campaign made it where I would actually have to submit that I would actually take the campaign, because I didn't take any money till late, close toward the election. I paid that out of my pocket. And I guess I'm gonna be paying for me not knowing, because that clearly, and I put it out in the paper that it showed that I paid off my credit card. And I didn't understand that that would be the same thing as if somebody else gave me the money by me paying it out of my own pocket. So I mean, it was a misunderstanding on my part, and I can't do nothing about that. I just didn't know.
So let me ask Ms. Wetzel, if we resolve this today, does this gentleman have any additional filings he needs to make, or?
Well, I think at this point, him going back and filing the 2013, the 3 reports that he failed to file, but he did disclose the expenditures in the December report, would be kind of moot. He is currently actually serving as a city councilman in Monroe for a different district, and I reviewed his current filings and he's fine and up to date. So from after this complaint was filed, he has been in compliance with the act. So this is really just dealing with his 2013 campaign, which is, he no longer is even operating the same campaign because he's in a different district, if that makes sense. So, go ahead, finish, Ms. Wetzel. And, I think what his position is, if I may say, is that he says that he cannot pay anything, that he does not want to pay anything. My position is that at least needs to pay the outstanding $125 late fee. And I had recommended civil penalties to go along with the failure to file the declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions. Sorry.
First, I want to thank you for running. And I noted in the material that it's because you wanted to make a change, and I think it's very laudable that people put themselves out there to be involved in local government. It is very challenging, and it's a hard thing to do. Second, it does appear from both your statements today as well as your email that you may qualify potentially for a hardship waiver for the fees, but unless you provide the documentation needed for that, that's not something that we can we can't say that you have in fact a hardship unless we have documentary evidence of the hardship. So I'm actually going to make a motion that we table this matter so that Mr. Garrett and Ms. Wetzel can get the correct documentation for a hardship and hopefully come to a consent order.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Oh,
I just got it. Mr. Garrett, you understand the motion?
I do.
you have any comments on the motion?
Not really. Let me ask you this, but I have to come back up here?
Unless you enter into consent order, we can do that.
Right, if we were to come to an agreement where we entered into a consent order based on the documents of a hardship, if you can provide evidence of a hardship, and we can come to agreement where you do have a hardship and you just would sign a compliance order or consent order, and if we receive that by mail and you don't have to come in prior to the meeting, then you would not have another hearing.
I'm gonna make a competing motion. I'm gonna say in the interest of the judicial economy, I would, Stephen, you might need to advise me if this is proper, but I think a fine of $200 would be proper. So I would move that we fine this gentleman that amount.
Okay, so procedurally where we are right now, I'm sorry, I don't remember my thing, but procedurally.
What number are you?
Sure.
What number?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm 25.
Okay, go ahead.
Procedurally where we are right now is that we are at the probable cause determination. So you have to find probable cause first. And then there normally would be a hearing and so forth on this. So I think the motion to table this is to basically table the probable cause determination while there may be a consent order. Of course, you can find probable cause today and still it can be negotiated and we can have a consent order after that. That would be a $0 or whatever would be appropriate consent order.
Okay.
And as far as a recommendation, if you have a recommendation as to an appropriate penalty that you want to state now, assuming the documentation is provided, that's always helpful.
Okay, then I'll withdraw my motion then for tabling it at this point, and if the chairman wants to make his motion.
Oh, I was going to vote for your motion then.
Oh.
I was going to say that we tabled this with the recommendation that this be settled by consent order around $200, which is what I think seems appropriate. So
I'm bothered by any kind of additional fine without me knowing more about it, frankly. We got something 4 years ago, BB before Bethany, right?
Yeah, okay, right.
So, we have things that we look back, and y'all do a remarkable job of cleaning up old cases that have been laid there, and just y'all's diligence and vigilance are why these things come up that we have to get them off the books. But here's a gentleman that's offering himself a public service. He's paid his money, and now he's, I really am bothered by having to ask him for more money when he paid what we told him he owed. So I'm in support of the table, but it doesn't, not attendant to my voting for that is that he be able to be fined any until you and him can talk about it.
Okay.
okay, so I think we have a motion to table this, and you've heard the views of several commissioners about sort of where we're leaning with this, so we would ask you to take that under advisement.
Well, you need to have a vote on the motion.
And so, would someone like to second the motion to?
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to table this. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. All right. Next is in the matter of Emmanuel Ransom.
Thanks.
Hold on, I'm gonna wait just one second.
Mr. Ransom's here too. He's got to let's get him.
Okay, come on, Mr. Ransom.
Yes. Commissioners, this is case number 2013-0043 in the matter of Emmanuel Ransom. Again, this is a 2013 case. It was filed by Whitnell Knox on October 31st, 2013. We had encountered some difficulty when we were serving the respondent. We got green cards back that said unclaimed, unable to serve. We attempted service several times over the years, and then finally we sent a process server in early this year to ensure that he would get service, and he received it. And he had notice of the meeting, obviously. The complainant alleged in this matter that Mr. Ransom accepted an anonymous contribution, and to his detriment, he reported to receiving the anonymous contribution, as he should have. OCGA 21-5-30E prohibits the acceptance of anonymous contributions, and upon acceptance of anonymous contributions, you are to immediately remit that anonymous contribution to the state treasury. That's lined out in the law. There's no record indicating that Mr. Ransom remitted that money to the state treasury. So the violation that we are moving forward with is that he failed to remit that, and he accepted an anonymous contribution. Additionally, during the investigation of the complaint, it was noted that he failed to file a personal financial disclosure statement, and then he failed to file a CCDR to close out his account. So he currently has $250 in outstanding late fees, and a civil penalty. We've kind of gone back and forth with a consent order. He wanted to have an opportunity to speak today, so in that case, if it's okay with you, if you don't have any questions, let Mr. Ransom speak.
Go ahead, Mr. Ransom. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to come and speak with you. The order was given to serve me in 2013. I've been in the same address for 53 years. And I was a councilman and a mayor at the same time. And the post office was very familiar with me as far as a person goes. I mean, he used to stop me on the street and give me my mail. So being served this order in 2013 when I was in office, I don't understand that. Until now, when the guy came to the same house, gave the same paper, and I answered it. That's what I can't understand. And the reason why this complaint was brought against me was due to a disgruntled person that I threw out of a council meeting. That's where it all comes from. And I'm an honest person. And if somebody gave me money for a campaign and I didn't report it, it would be on my conscience. So when I found that money in my mailbox saying this is a contribution for your campaign, and it was from an anonymous donor with no name on it, I felt it was my obligation to go to City Hall and ask, shall I report this? And they told me, yes, put it on your campaign disclosure program. And being on time, we have a city clerk that's been with us for over close to 15 years now, and Tracy was adamant about us filing our reports. Now, closing out my account, I didn't know I had to do that. When I ran the last time for mayor, I just, I was real hurt that I wasn't supported from my community, which I've known for so many years, and I didn't make that final report. But the other ones, I don't understand why I was late on something, because it was to the point where she always got us to fill out our applications, and it must be that she waited to get everybody's application before she sent it in. That's what I think what happened. Not being insufficient about doing things. Tracy was adamant about that, and I was too in filing my report. So I apologize if any mistakes were made, but it was due to my ignorance. And being retired now, I don't mind paying a fine, but I'm not able to. I'm on a fixed income. I'm disabled, right now I'm trying to get myself back to halfway decent health. And I apologize for the mistakes. I know ignorance is no excuse, but I made the mistake, not knowing. I should have checked the ordinances because I was very particular about going in and checking things. But yeah, it was my fault. But as far as you guys getting hold of me in 2013, I still don't know why I was not contacted. Because like I said, I've been in the same address for 53 years. And everybody in Clarkston knows me. So I don't understand why. And this person that filed this report only did it to get back at me. Period. That's all I can say. But I thank you for the opportunity to speak with you, and I will definitely go along with your decision.
Any comments or questions? Does someone like to make a motion?
I do have a question, actually. Is the only reason why the consent order not signed by you, Mr. Ransom, is that you wanted the opportunity to speak today?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so, yes, Ms. Wetzel.
And I would, and maybe this is more appropriate for us to have a discussion between the two of us, I would be more than happy to waive the civil penalty. The bulk of the amount of the money in the consent order is that to remit $500 to the state treasury, because that's what the law requires you to do when you receive an anonymous contribution. That's really the bulk of that makes up the money.
So my suggestion would be, since the only reason it's not signed is because Mr. Ransom wanted his opportunity to be heard today, which we appreciate that, would be for you guys to maybe go and negotiate in the hall and see if you can get this consent order signed so that we do not have to have it as a preliminary hearing today. I don't know if I need to make that as a motion or...
Actually, I don't, if you were going to just take it up later, I don't think you need to take that as a motion.
Okay.
Did you say that payment of the fine would operate as a hardship?
Yes, sir. I mean, right now, I'm on less than $1,000 a month right now because I had a large sum I had to make to my ex from years ago that just
We all
came in
make
and took my money.
mistakes. We all make our mistakes.
Yeah.
Ms. Wessel, does he still have the opportunity to make a hardship request, or is that trumped by his obligation of the anonymous contribution?
I don't think that we can waive the amount
That's-
to repay the anonymous
that's-
contribution. And I did, and to just reiterate in our correspondence, that we can enter into a payment plan.
Yeah.
That's, you know, I think the $500 needs to be remitted.
I was fearful that we couldn't waive that, but I
Right.
don't know. You do, I don't.
Because it's not a civil penalty or late fee. Those are the things that y'all have the discretion to waive.
I thought so.
So this is the $500 I have to give to the state treasury?
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
I still have to repay it back even though I did report it?
It's the acceptance of it and not remitting it. It's not the reporting. But we can discuss this
Yeah.
Okay.
outside.
So let's just table it until Ms. Wetzel comes back in and lets us know whether we need to move forward or not. Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I see Mr. Lane and Mr. Strickland, Ms. Lewis are back. Do y'all have any news for us? Okay. All right, Robert, you want to start?
Sure. After much discussion, we were able to reach an agreement as to the outstanding civil penalty. The civil penalty would be $6,900. That brings total civil penalties to $8,000 to $375 in late fees. We have noted within the order that you have in front of you that Mr. Mitchell has $125 credit towards those outstanding late fees. So that's the extent of the order.
All right, Mr. Strickland, Ms. Lewis, do you have any comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we are in agreement with that amount and the total amount of penalties as Mr. Lane has just stated.
All right, any comments or questions?
I just want to say, well done, council. Well done. It's a job well done on behalf of the state and a job well done on behalf of Mr. Mitchell. So I applaud all of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Renner?
It probably sounds gratuitous coming from me, but I would like to say anyway, first of all, of course, compliment Mr. Strickland and Ms. Lewis for their working with us. But I also want to say, well, in the staff's view, and in my view as part of the staff, we think this is a very low penalty. It's appropriate because we think of the complete absence of intentional violations of the law that we could find in this case. They were more than technical defects, but I think that a low sanction in this case is only appropriate because of the complete absence of any sort of intentional conduct. And we would certainly seek greater penalties in other cases.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that's important to clarify.
Yes, and we strive, I think, to treat every case on its own merit and with all the facts. There's too many different considerations. But Mr. Lane, we understand what a complex job you undertook on behalf of the commission. Very, very detailed job. I know it took a lot of your time and effort, but good lawyers can usually work things out.
It always helps to have an Allen chart.
All right, so we're done here. We do not need a motion to accept.
Well, we've got a consent order, therefore, if you want to take it right now, with that amount, we'd need a motion and second and whether to accept the consent orders with the $6,900 amount put in.
Okay, does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move that we accept the consent order.
Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the consent order as previously described. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you very much. Stephen, we've got, Commissioner Kathy's got about 15 more minutes. We want to do the increase in the campaign limits.
Why don't I take that right now then?
Okay. Hold on.
Understanding that we are still in session, so for those of you that are here and exiting, if you would please do so quietly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say that you would have gotten this handout sooner, but honest to goodness, it's been sitting on my printer, which refused to deliver it to us. So, but I do appreciate us taking up the issue about whether the campaign contribution limits should be raised. Statute calls for them to be raised periodically. It's 21.4, 41K, and you raise or lower in $100 increments. So smaller amounts would not be appropriate to lower. And it's based on inflation or deflation, and we use the standard from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which calculates the inflation rate on a national basis. My recommendation is that we do not, or the Commission does not raise the limits, because looking at the inflated amounts using 2016 as your base year, and it was raised last year, you'll see the most it could go up would be on inflation 98.89 for the statewide primary. It's now at 6,600, and you could bring it to 6,700 should you so vote. However, for the other limits, that would be substantially less than $100, and it would be $100 across the board. So my recommendation is that the limits not be raised.
Any comments or questions? Okay, so I had a question. I thought when it got so close, like 66.98, that we rounded up and raised.
And I would agree with that if we were only looking at statewide, but in fact, if you look below that, you'll see that it's 58.43, so closer to $60, which is substantially less than 100 for statewide.
Oh, 58.43, where are you looking?
Okay, so if you look at, we have 4 different types of races. In our rows across there, we start with primary general. That's actually the fewest number of races you've got. You've got the statewide runoff would be fewer, but and those are contribution limits that are separately set by statute. The only one that's close to 100 is the statewide primary general. The others are substantially less than $100.
So we couldn't just raise that one and leave the other ones?
I don't think so. I think you either raise them 100 or not. Now, I will tell you that I don't think that it's been ever considered that way or not, and if you chose to do it that way, we would certainly do it that way. But I think generally, my experience is that they're treated together. Statute, by the way, which is 41K, is not well drafted.
Okay. Do we have the, I'm gonna look at the reg real quick.
Do you need the code section side or the regulation side?
I've got them right here.
Okay.
So your position is they have to be either all raised or not raised?
No, it's not my position they have to be, but I can tell you that's been the practice. So it's my understanding of the practice. I've only been in this position less than 2 years, so can't say that I can go back a long time and say that I knew what it was for sure, but in fact, we went for many years without raising them at all.
Would it create any difficulty doing just one but not the others? I mean, just practical?
I'll tell you, for a practical matter, I think we can handle it if you wanted to do one and not the others. And so that doesn't give me concern. And frankly, setting a new precedent today, there's no reason not to do that either, should you think that appropriate. I also would like to say that I believe Mr. Chalmers wanted to address you on this.
Thank you, Mr. Berry. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't anticipating speaking on this, but given the conversation, I think it's appropriate to note that there is no reason why you can't raise one and not the others. But I would also, I'm not sure that the starting dates are correct, and I'm just simply pointing out that the way the law works is that the commissioner is required to look at each public office, and at the end of the election cycle for that public office, make a determination about whether or not the increase has to go into effect, and has to be done in $100 increments. I think as a practical matter, if you're talking about $98, it would go up 98, you have to do it for and I don't think you need to do that for all across the board. You get it for one and not all. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Let me make one comment about what Mr. Chalmers has said about the election issue. And if you look at the statute, which is 41K, again, in my opinion at least, it's not a very well drafted statute. We took this up when it was considered to try to address this with the regulation, which is 189-1-.07. And the reason we addressed it with regulation as to when it would be raised, which now sets it by regulation in March, is because, well, if you're looking at statewide races, for instance, it's not hard to see that yearly basis, which would be after November. The fact of the matter is the municipal races are all across the board in terms of when they're conducted. So you would be meeting constantly if you interpreted the statute that way. So the commission decided by a regulation, which is binding on us, just to do it in March today.
But looking at the statute, it says at the end of the election cycle applicable to each public office. I mean, so for the statewide and for the legislature, it seems like that would be the end of this year.
Well, and in fact, we addressed that when we discussed the regulation. And it was the vote at that time is the only way to appropriately address it, because they're all across, is just to have it done in March, in the March meeting. The December meeting, which is after the November election, but very shortly after the December election, is usually when we decided not to do it. If you want to change the regulation, that's fine, but that's how it was previously discussed and agreed to.
Well, I think you're obviously right about that, but I'm having second thoughts, because here we are, it's March and campaigns are coming up, and
I completely agree. In fact,
so I'm sort of the opinion that we punt on this today and wait till the December meeting, but I welcome other comments, of course.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Okay, so.
You need a motion?
Okay, so I'm going to move that we do not adjust these limits at this point.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded not to adjust these limits. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries.
And I will also say that we will propose a regulation to move our consideration date to the December meeting rather than March.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Thank you, sir.
I'm sorry we passed a regulation that forced you to go here now.
No harm, no foul.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we're going to go back to our agenda and, okay, Ms. Wetzel, you and Mr. Ransom reached
We have.
Okay.
So the consent order will provide that he, will not violate the act further, and that he will remit $500 to the state treasury in $35 increments for a year. And that's what we decided was reasonable for him to afford. And so I asked that you would approve this consent order. And Mr. Ransom, I'm going to redraft the consent order to make it clean, and then we'll mail it for him to sign, and then we'll send it to you, Chair Jordan, for signature. But you can go ahead and approve it now.
Okay, any questions?
If you wish to.
Okay, I would make a motion that we accept this consent order as described by Ms. Wetzel. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, is Ms. Harris here? Okay, I'm going to call that case since she's here today. Bethany, is this your case?
It is.
A lot of people didn't know it was Norma. Because people, if I had an L, I'd be normal, so. Now, hang in with me, I'm used to being called that.
I tell you, we'll let Ms. Wetzel start.
I'm
That's
so
sort of
sorry.
our tradition.
You called me, I
No.
apologize.
Thank you very much for being here. Go ahead, Ms. Wetzel.
Commissioners, this is case number 2013, another 2013 case, -0030, in the matter of Norma Beth Harris, more commonly known as Beth Harris. She is a former school board, Muskogee County School Board member. She was elected in 2010 and sworn in 2011. The allegation alleged in the complaint by Nathan Smith is that she failed to file 3 personal financial disclosure statements and 5 campaign contribution disclosure reports. And if you'd like, I can list all the reports that it is alleged that she filed late. She did not file the reports until after the complaint was filed, and she has $875 in outstanding late fees. She's going to get her glasses.
Okay.
If you'd like me to list the reports that she missed, I would be happy to.
And I see a consent order.
It was transmitted to Ms. Harris, but there's been no back and forth.
All right, Ms. Harris?
Okay. Well, I did see different names that are on this commission that were not here in 2010. So I think you were, and you weren't. But anyway, my point is that I kind of find it interesting that she said, this is another one of those from back in 2013, because that's how I feel about it. This was filed by a man who admittedly in this newspaper, this Villager Inquirer, which I didn't make any copies because I have hardships too. My printer doesn't work and I can't afford ink and I don't work full time. I am a retired teacher. Lost my re-election to this buddy who convinced him to file this complaint. The reason I didn't file them until I got the notice that I owed them was because I didn't know that I owed them. And the first item that he has accused me of not doing is absolutely not true. The files are on the Muskogee County website. The first ones that he said I didn't file for 2010, the personal financial disclosure. Anyway, that year we were required to send things, take things to our local board. And it was after I was elected that the state legislature changed to put it into this system. I have articles, I was asking her if I could give you, if you're hooked to the internet, because I don't have papers to hand all of you, but I guess that's not possible. But are you familiar with, and I'll just tell you that the state auditor did a report. You're all aware of the 2014 report on this commission. And of course, this wasn't the same group, so it wasn't pointed to you. I'm very familiar with it. I could probably sit here and quote it to you, but it's just not, it's not fair. I've heard several people say, you know, I got charged October 7th, 2013. I got a letter in the mail. I read the letter. I called, and I believe I spoke to, I forgot her name, but later I spoke to Holly LaVerge. They were aware that I was aware, but since they didn't have a record of me receiving the letter, he made this charge, then something got written in the newspaper, and so they sent a certified letter. I knew what it was. I didn't waste my time going to the post office because I knew what it was. I had the same form that they sent. And in this report, it tells you that one of your roles is to educate those that are subject to this commission. And if you don't let us know that things have changed and that we owe money, if you do not send us a late notice and let us have time to pay that money before it gets higher and higher and higher, you know, you as a commission, please know when I'm talking about you individually, you know that I'm talking about the commission that was in place in the past. You have an obligation to say, hey, you didn't file, you owe me money. And then I have the obligation to pay. I'm a rule follower. I'm a former school teacher. I'm an honor student. I'm a member of the National Honor Society. I don't break rules. I don't do the 55, over the 55. Most people give me a 50. I'm a rule follower. So anyway, I filed all the papers that I was supposed to file with our local campaign office. Then I started hearing a little bit of buzz about this, and I called down to the elections office and spoke to Jeanette James, who is Nancy Boren, who is the director. I spoke to her, and she said, oh, this is your non-election year. You don't owe me anything. Well, I think what she probably should have said, oh, you're supposed to go to Atlanta now, and I don't know anything about it. Deal with that. But I have an article, and like I said, every bit of this is proof, and I can give you a website to go to if you want to read it, or I just don't have it printed out. But our local newspaper made a big brouhaha about this issue, and it was over 50% of our local and state elected officials or candidates were late or non-filers during this period of time that this commission was responsible for collecting and making sure that we were educated and on top of things. And Jeanette James, under the leadership of Nancy Boren, calls the candidates, hey, you know, it's coming up. Hey, you know, tomorrow's the deadline. And then I think they also sent papers out. Nothing was ever sent to me. And there are, in this newspaper article from the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer written by Mark Rice, there's a statement in it, and if I have time, you said, do I have 20 minutes? Do I have 34 minutes too? In the article, Nancy Boren herself says, Mark Hughes, be patient with me because I'm a tad nervous because I don't like being in front. I like to be up there looking down at people. I'm just teasing, trying to find my little blur. But basically what she was saying is she didn't have a problem because she used the word hounded, and she had made a phone call to Miss Baisley. Are you familiar? Any of you familiar with Miss Baisley?
She's in this room right now.
Okay, where is she?
Miss Bazille.
Bazille. That's you? Okay.
No.
Oh, Miss Bazille.
That's Maria.
Well, hey. Anyway, she said she made a phone call to her and offered or wanted to know something about training because she herself knew that things would be different, especially for the people that she dealt with on a regular basis who have long-term elected officials in our area. But anyway, she says, as executive director, this is written by Mark Rice from the Ledger-Inquirer, as the executive director of the Muskogee County Elections and Registration Office for the past 18 years, Nancy Boren has a good sense of which local elected officials make good faith attempts to comply with state ethics laws. In the past 10 years, she said she can remember her office having to impose a late fee on only one elected official for non-compliance. We wouldn't have violations because we would hound them until we got our disclosures.
Who was saying this?
Nancy Boren is our elections board director.
She's the local filing officer for Columbus, Muskogee. And Jeanette James is her assistant, who we speak with a lot.
They're good people. What that tells me is that there is an issue with the filing process. There are those officials who really tried but missed the deadline because of technical issues. Then there are other officials who never file anything. There's a big difference. Whenever I got the letter, I immediately began to get my files in order, and they were filed. They were filed. I got this letter sometime late October, and everything was in place and filed by end of December that same year.
So, Ms. Harris, I've noticed that you have filed everything that was filed late, but it is filed. And we did, or not we, but Ms. Wetzel did send you a consent order, and understanding that you have admitted that you did file some things late as well too. Have you all had any discussion about this consent order and whether you want to enter into this consent order or not?
I read the letter that she sent, and being that I would not plan on paying this because I don't think that I owe it, because based on, I mean, to me, all I really should have to do is ask you to please refer to the state auditor's 2014 report on that commission. I have to say that one because I know that it wasn't all of you guys. It was a mess, and according to this, you are supposed to educate us. That did not happen. You're supposed to let us know that we owe money and give us a chance to pay it. I never got an invoice at all, ever. Still to this day, the only way I know that I have seen an invoice is looking on the website. That's the only, I didn't even know it was on there, so I haven't gotten one at my house. And y'all didn't get a glowing report from the auditor.
Okay, well, that's fine. The state auditor's report was not an abdication of our jurisdiction. We still have authority to enforce violations.
I absolutely do understand your authority, absolutely, and I don't disrespect your authority. But what I'm saying is that due to the findings of this report, okay, let's go to House 2016 House Bill 370 and 2016 Senate Bill 127. they had written to get rid of all this, waive these fees and fines for that period.
Okay, well, that, quite frankly, that's not relevant. What's relevant is what you did or what you didn't do. So if you want to speak to that, you can do that, but we're not going into all this arbitrary matters that don't have any relevance to us.
Okay, well, I guess then, if you think that what our state auditor thinks about this commission, if you think that there's 500 people in the Atlanta area, we have people sitting in judgeships. Our very own Muskogee County District Attorney is on this list, our marshal is on this list. There are thousands and thousands of people in your...
Oh, I'm sorry, on what list?
On the late and non-filers list, the files that they should have already began to get their money from way before they continue to compound the money that you say we owe. I mean, if it's $125 and I'm late paying that payment, $125 or $50 or whatever, and then I turn around and you don't let me know. And then there's also something in here, and this is not in the, it's in here, but it's also the act. You have a responsibility as a commission. Okay, you got 5 years to charge me. Yeah, you got in the door there, that's not a problem. But you also have a responsibility to send me a notice of hearing in a timely manner. There were 3 of us that got charged by this man, and there were others on the board and in our city that didn't. And then this newspaper article states the reason he did it was because he planned to unseat us. Well, he and his buddies did manage to unseat us. And one of my board members, 3 of us, one was supposed to be here today, but he paid his fines and said, y'all let him not have to. All he did was pay the $125 fee, and he told him he didn't have to come and he didn't have to pay more fees. That goes along with what that you don't want to hear it, but the report says that y'all don't do it you do not assess fees equitably or
So, Ms. Harris, thank you first of all for being here. I'm glad that you came today, and we appreciate it when we have respondents come, because we have an awful lot of people who don't come. And it's nice for us to be able to have the opportunity to hear both sides of the story. So thank you for doing that. I do agree with Chair Jordan's statement that the state auditor's report does not abdicate our jurisdiction, and we do still have to enforce the act as it is in front of us. And what is in front of us at this time is that there are some violations of some late filings. You have filed them, albeit late. I applaud you for filing them. Thank you for doing so. However, they were filed late. So we have 2 choices at this point. We can either make a finding that you have in fact violated the Campaign Finance Act. There are reasonable grounds for us to believe, and based on the testimony before us as well as the evidence in front of us, we can vote one way or the other. That's option 1. The second option is for you to enter into a consent order, and that is something that you would need to negotiate with Ms. Wetzel. We cannot at this time, I am not understanding anybody else's case but yours in front of me right now. So I don't want to take into consideration anybody else that may have had a complaint filed against them by the same individual that filed a complaint against you. So again, understanding that we are bound by the act, which leaves us at this point with 2 choices. The first being that we either find reasonable grounds to believe that you violated the act, and the second being that you can have some time to negotiate with Ms. Wetzel a consent order. That is all we can do at this point. I appreciate all of your comments about education, and believe me, we have worked very hard. Yes, and we have worked very hard, and all of us are new to the commission. And we were not on the commission at the time that state auditor's report was referring to during that period of time. We have worked very hard to right the ship. So we would really like for you to take the opportunity to review at this time the consent order and see if you can negotiate with Ms. Wetzel, because if not, we then have to make a motion to determine whether we feel as a body that you have violated the Campaign Finance Act. Those are the 2 choices we have. There are no other options that we can give you at this time. So again, we appreciate all of your comments, understand that we have taken the auditor's report to heart and are working very hard on all of that. Again, I thank you for coming. We really do like to hear both sides of the story, but we have two choices. So you can either make a decision to go out and we can table this and you can negotiate with Ms. Wetzel, or one of us can make a motion. So I'll give you a few minutes to make that decision, but that's kind of where we are at this point.
So you're telling me not to say anything else? You're not going to allow me to speak any further because, you know, that's all well and good, but you do have the authority to say, you know what, you're right, this is the biggest mess the state has, one of the biggest messes the state has. The legislatures, the assembly tried to get it fixed, but because somebody threw in that dark horse thing at the very end and, oh, we want to make sure that they messed up the vote. So when everybody knows that it's a mess, and then when you've got people that you're not bringing forth because they've not been charged by a citizen who was angry, just like several other people have said, you've got thousands of people. So I guess you're going to clear your table of all the cases that you've got where an angry citizen came forward and leave all the other people until you gradually get to these thousands and thousands of people. And I guess the DAs and the judges and all and the marshals that are on there will be last, and you're going to stick with the school board members and the council, the lowly people. You get them first. Is that going to be how it's going to go? And then therefore you know, if you, right now, I sat here and I made a complaint against every single person. This whole entire state would be a mess. I can promise you right now that I'm not going to sign any consent order. And I mean, if you really feel in your heart that y'all cannot, as a group, decide that was the biggest mess and the biggest mistake the state Senate and the state House of Representatives ever made was to turn the way it was going, it was going really well, like Nancy Boren said, it was going well. They voted to send it over here. It became a debacle, a mess, and they turned around and gave it back to the board at this local level, and things are going smoothly, and you're clearing the thing, and you're trying to get money to good luck. Good luck. I mean, good luck. But you really have the power to fix this now in each and every case and sit there and say, okay, it was between these periods of time, and it happened because of this, and these poor folks got caught up in it, and it's not just one or two that messed up, it's thousands of people. I'm talking judges and state senators and y'all.
All right, I think we got your point. Ms. Wetzel, do you want to respond to anything?
There are some things that I would like to respond to, but at this point, I think it's kind of moot. You mentioned that
personal.
No. You mentioned that you didn't receive a notice of late fees, but prior to that, you mentioned that.
I never got any notice that I was late, that I owed you any money or any forms ever until I got this form. And talking about waste.
Okay, well, I don't have any comments. And
this came to me after several other.
All right.
This is four different. One delivery.
Gotcha.
4 different.
Okay, Mr. Ritter, who's president?
And then you've got different ones you mailed.
Ms. Harris, can you?
No, they did waste money, and they wasted people's reputation. It's my reputation that got printed in this newspaper, mine. So good luck with it, because when you get every single one of these people.
Probable cause.
Yeah, I'll second that. A motion for to find a probable cause has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. Thank you. All right, let's see. Okay, I've got a couple other people that may be here. Edmund Richardson.
He has entered, I think the complainant's left, so we don't, it's a consent order now. But the list that I gave you earlier just notified you of who parties that were.
Okay. So let's get back to our agenda. In the matter of Courtney Dillon.
Commissioners, this is case number 2010-0062 in the matter of Courtney Dillard. You may recall that this was on the agenda in December and the individual asked for a continuance. They also sent me a consent order that was, they faxed me a consent order that was signed by the respondent, not notarized, and had a copy of their driver's license, which is not sufficient to be considered as to present to you as far as signed and agreed to. I received an email from the respondent today, and he said that he agrees to the terms. This is based on a complaint filed on October 15, 2010. The allegation was that he failed to register his committee prior to his committee accepting contributions. This is a violation of OCGA 21-5-30B and also Commission Rule 189-4-.01.
So I don't mean to interrupt you, but you said he emailed you this morning and said that he agreed to the terms of
the consent order.
Okay, so this is a consent order then?
Well, I would ask that you agree to the terms of the consent order. It imposes a $50 civil penalty on the condition, because he has not provided me with a signed notarized document, and he has been asked to do that multiple times and he has not paid the civil penalty. I would ask that you go ahead and find reasonable grounds to believe that he violated the act, but also approve the consent order if we receive it by a certain day. Does that make sense? Just so we can go ahead and get this case moving.
So moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? I'm sorry, Mr. Ritter, you buzzed in. That's not-
Actually, and then Ms. Wetzel said exactly what I was going to say, so.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. It just seems,
Yeah.
as a motion, that seems kind of contradictory.
So, okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll speak on that if I
Yeah.
could,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair.
please.
So, we're here at a probable cause determination. However, we have gotten word that he will accept a consent order that we've proposed, but we don't have a signature, so we can't give you that consent order to approve. Given that's the case, what Ms. Wetzel is asking, A, is first that you find probable cause per the motion that you've done, and second, and you can separately move this if you want, rather than then being delayed to another agenda and having that consent order approved, go ahead now and approve that consent order pending the receipt of his signed copy of that. We treat it as one or two motions, but that's what she's asking.
Okay, so we made a motion finding probable cause, so we need to do a separate motion agreeing to accept the terms of the consent order that you have provided us.
Under the condition
that he returned the signed consent order in 30 days, which is when we have a negotiation period anyways by, before it gets turned over to the Attorney General's office. But I would like to go ahead and get that ticking since this is the second time it's been on the agenda.
All right. Mr. Evans, you good with that?
Good with it. Thanks for
Okay.
the clarification.
Okay, so does someone want to make that motion?
I'll move that we accept the consent order, and that it has to be back to us, signed and notarized properly, within 30 days.
I second.
Okay, got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. All right, in the matter of Melissa Watson Morrison.
Commissioners, this is case number 2012-0046. It's filed by Lynn Bond on July 17th, 2012. The allegation is that the respondent, who is a 2012 candidate for state representative, District 19, failed to report a qualifying fee payment on her June 30th, 2012 CCR and failed to disclose signed expenditures on her June 30th, 2012 CCR as well. During the investigation of the complaint, it was discovered that what she really did is that she filed her campaign contribution disclosure report late, and that campaign contribution disclosure report included her qualifying fee payment. And then also she was not required to disclose the expenditures that for signs because they were not incurred during the reporting period covered by the June 30th, 2012 CCDR. Some of that was not available to the complainant because the amendment that she made that included the qualifying fee payment did not, for some reason, did not register with our computer system. But I can see that she filed it in the date that it was postmarked. It just was not available for the complainant to see. So sent a consent order to Miss Watson Morrison. She, it's been received. We have got the green card back. Tried to contact her by email and phone, could not get in touch with her. The civil penalty, I even sent 2 different consent orders to her. The first one imposed a civil penalty and that she would just pay the late fee. And then the second one was that she would just pay the late fee, and I have not heard from her. So I'd ask that you find that there are reasonable grounds to believe that she violated the Georgia Government Transparency Campaign Finance Act by failing to file her June 30th, 2012 CCDR timely.
So could we conflate this like we did the last one and add to it that if she timely signs and pays with, signed and notarized consent order within 30 days, that we will accept that?
Yes, you could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I would move along those lines.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the motion carries. In the matter of Neil Craig Pruitt. Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a 5 to 10 minute break right now.
Okay, let me just note, sorry to speak.
Yes.
But I know that Mr. Evans is going to have to leave.
Well, then just give me 2 minutes. I just have to use the restroom.
Will we have a quorum at that point?
We will.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it'll be a 5 minute break, so everyone.
Commissioners, the case of Neil Craig Pruitt, which is case number 2010-0053. That case began when a complaint was filed by Mr. Terry Taylor on August 9th, 2010. Mr. Taylor alleged that the respondent had made numerous violations of the Campaign Finance Act and that he had not properly filed campaign contribution disclosure reports. In reviewing the complaint in our records, we did notice additional violations of the Campaign Finance Act, and those additional violations were noticed to the respondent. Basically, he failed to file personal financial disclosure statements. He failed to list certain items within that personal financial disclosure statement. However, the allegations in the complaint about the failure to file a campaign contribution disclosure report actually did not apply because unbeknownst to the complainant, the respondent had not filed a declaration of intent to accept campaign contributions. He did not accept or expend campaign contributions, therefore he had no duty to file during the time period the complainant alleged. And all of his subsequent CCDRs, once he did file a DOI, were timely filed, the transactions were appropriate, necessary expenses. So that allegation has been removed when we are just dealing with the late filing of a personal financial disclosure statement. That allegation is verified and is sound. I ask that the Commission find reasonable grounds to believe that the Campaign Finance Act has been violated and move the case forward to OSA.
Let me ask one question.
Yes, sir.
So I noticed that he had counsel in this matter.
Yes, he did. Mr. Kaufman, father and son team. My most recent correspondence with them is that they have withdrawn from the case as their client has become non-communicative. We have served, original service of the hearing was on his attorneys, but once we were told he was non-communicative, we sent additional notice to his various residences. He's got 1 in Florida, 2 in Georgia, so.
Did we receive back that he was in fact properly served for this hearing, Mr. Pruitt?
He was properly served through counsel.
Well, but they indicated they withdrawn, so that gives me some pause.
Well, they withdrew after service, if that helps.
Yeah, but again, my question is, we then sent him notification after counsel said they were no longer his counsel.
We did. We did not be certified mail. I believe we did regular mail.
Okay.
Yes, no, that's through his attorneys. I'm looking to see if there's another one. Because I thought we sent him personally.
We did. I used our new LexisNexis stalker net to find his various.
The mail that was not certified.
No, we
We
did
did
send a
certified and
certified
regular
one.
mail.
And
We did both.
it was sent back to us because he never picked it up. It expired on the 13th this month.
Okay, I'm gonna make a motion that we remove this one and put it back on the next agenda and see if we can get him properly served. And ask Mr. Lane to please ask Mr. Kaufman to file a notice of withdrawal of counsel so that we have that as part of the record.
It's just not included in your.
It's just not included. Okay, they did file a notice of
Yeah,
withdrawal.
when your packet got to be 636 pages, we took out ancillary stuff.
Okay. All right.
As far as this case, given the amount of penalty that would be imposed and the cost of a process server, would y'all be more inclined to entertain a motion to dismiss at the next hearing, as opposed to us incurring the cost of the process server, to which the state will not recoup anything related, and the amount that you're going to pay to find him and have him personally served?
What were the fines? What was the
Approximate amount of funds.
If it's for failure to file a PFDS on time, it's $100.
That's the fee is $125.
And then you got the late fee of $125.
Right.
But the civil penalty would be $100.
Could be as high as $1,000, but.
Right.
But as a general rule, we don't exceed those amounts for this type of case.
Well, we sent certified mail to how many of his residences?
It went,
I think just one. I think it was just the one.
Okay, well, based on that, I think I'm going to stay with my motion. If it only went to one of his residences as certified mail, I'm going to stay with my motion.
So does he have multiple residences?
he does.
Yeah, I'll second that. I think we ought to, I don't think we're necessarily in the dollar business here. We're in the violation business. So I'll second that motion. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. All right, the matter of Houston Nelson.
Commissioners, this is case number 2011-0022 in the matter of Houston Nelson. Houston Nelson was a former city council member of the Stockbridge City Council. The complaint was received on October 25th, 2011, filed by Greg Deemer. The violation was that he failed to file a PFDS due in 2011 in violation of OCGA 21-5-50. He qualified on August 29th, 2011. Therefore, he was required to file within 15 days. He did not. He did not file until after the complaint was filed and he received the complaint. This is kind of another service issue. We have diligently attempted to serve him. We've sent certified mail to his last known addresses. We've used our Lexus People Finder, sent certified mail to those. We engaged the services of a process server, and we spoke with him yesterday. He sent us pictures. He's tried to serve multiple times. It appears that the address that we have is now for sale. We contacted Mr. Nelson's employer. He's no longer employed there. He doesn't have a forwarding address, and I contacted him with the email address that he had provided the commission. No response. Really, there's no other addresses in our People Finder or Lexus search to serve him at. He's really unavailable. So a little bit different than Robert's case, but we cannot find him. But it's an old case. Honestly, the consent order that I was seeking really just wanted him to pay the late fee that was assessed for it. So I ask that you find that there are reasonable grounds to believe that he violated OCGA 21-5-50 by failing to file a PFDS within 15 days of qualifying in 2011.
So if we found that, it would go to,
But go to OSA and then we'd still have to find him.
so could we make a joint motion that we find probable cause, but that we would accept this consent order if we're able to find him say 30, we'll enter the consent order 30 days after we're able to locate it,
I'm
which would extend the
agreeable to
time
that.
frame out.
It's very similar to the prior motion.
It's,
Yeah,
no, it's
right,
basically
yeah.
all my cases.
Okay, well, I would move along this line. Is there a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. All right. In the matter of Sandra Lucille Murray.
Commissioners, this case started on October 4th, 2010, when a complaint was filed by Mr. Stone Mathis. The respondent was campaigning for the District 8 State House seat, and she actually won. She stayed in office from 2010 until she lost her re-election. Sorry. Hopefully this will be a little bit better. The complainant alleged that Ms. Murray violated various provisions of the Campaign Finance Act as well as rules and regulations. To be more specific, she failed to register her friends and neighbors of Sandra Murray Campaign Committee, similar violation to that which Mr. Mitchell had with his Cesar Mitchell for Atlanta. We continued auditing her accounts. We found that her CCRs and PFDSs were completely compliant and fine. The only violation she has is the failure to register her campaign committee. She was served notice of the hearing. She was properly served notice of the complaint. Back when the case began, we asked that she find reasonable grounds to believe that the Campaign Finance Act was violated, and the case be forwarded to OSEP for administrative hearing.
Robert, you haven't heard anything from her?
No, sir. She's one of those radio silent respondents. I have noticed that the probable cause determinations tend to make about half of the radio silent people become communicative real quick. And then you do have a few stragglers who just tell you that you can do unpleasant things, and then they have to go see Mr. Fuller.
I'll move we make a finding of reasonable grounds.
I'll second that.
I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded to find reasonable grounds that a violation of the Campaign Finance Act has occurred. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries.
And just for y'all's information as well, like Ms. Wetzel, I send out consent orders to everyone and try our best to get people to resolve it. This is the last resort where we just, there's nothing else for us to do.
All right. Next is in the matter of John Dobbs.
Commissioners, this is case number 2012-0080. This filed by Patricia Posey on November 14th, 2012. John Dobbs was a former Haralson County Commissioner. At first he was elected to District 2 post in 2010, and then he moved from District 2 to District 3, so he had to resign that seat, and he resigned on November 1st, 2011, and then he subsequently ran for District 3 in 2012. Therefore, he had filing responsibilities for both campaigns for his District 2 seat and his District 3 seat. The allegation is that he did not file anything ever, and during the investigation of the complaint, it was discovered that he has never filed anything. So I would ask that the commission would find that there's reasonable grounds to believe that he violated OCGA 21-5-34 7 times, and that he violated OCGA 21-5-50 3 times by failing to file his PFDS due in 2011, 2012, and 2013. And just so you know, with the service issue, we got our green card back that was unclaimed. However, we sent a process server, and they were able to serve him with the notice of the hearing and gave him the consent order. Never heard from him.
So did he leave office after 2013?
He did. Well, after 2013, that's when the candidates began filing locally again, and so he filed correctly locally, but he also did not seek re-election in, I believe his election year was 2015.
Yeah. All right, any questions? Any motions? Okay, I would,
Sorry.
we're eating lunch here. I move that we find that there are reasonable grounds to find that there's a violation of the Campaign Finance Act here. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. The matter of Michael Ray James.
Commissioners, I'm afraid this is going to be a flashback case for you. The commission has already found reasonable grounds to believe that the Campaign Finance Act was violated, and that was done back in September of 2015. Out of an abundance of caution, I'm bringing it back in front of y'all. Because after you found reasonable grounds to believe, and we sent correspondence to Mr. James, who was then residing in Hawaii, his response was, "What are you talking about? There was a hearing? I have no idea what you mean." And we looked at the green card. It doesn't say Michael Ray James. It's one of those signatures where someone signs it, you know, kind of just a bunch of scribbles. We had a service track him down to a residence in Alabama. So we had him reserved again for a notice of preliminary hearing, just so he would have the opportunity, if he wanted to come and, you know, say his piece about the allegations. Just by way of a recap, the allegations against Mr. James was that while he was running for the District 19 Georgia House seat, he had numerous violations of the Campaign Finance Act. He failed to disclose his campaign contributions as required by 21-534-B1A, something similar to what y'all have heard before. Although a lot of his campaign contributions were self-funded, when I say he didn't file CCRs, he just didn't file anything, even though they were self-funded. That was after he filed a declaration of intent to accept contributions on June 7th, 2012, so this is one of our older ones. Additionally, he failed to, just so you know, it's the June 30th, September 30th, October 25, and December 31 reports from his election year. It's basically all the reports he's required to file after he qualified for office. And that's the only reason I'm bringing it back to you, is just out of an abundance of caution that he was not served last time.
What happened? How did you end up communicating with him eventually?
It's kind of a sad case. He's from my home county, and he was running for office. He lost. There was some bad press. He had some personal issues. His wife kicked him out of his house. The first time we had him served, she accepted service on his behalf, even though they were divorced, and she kicked him out of the house and had some ownership of the home. Didn't bother to tell us that. We then reserved him again in Auburn, where he had moved and taken a job at Auburn University. He then subsequently moved again, before we could complete our first hearing, to Hawaii, conveniently not telling us the address. We located him in Hawaii, sent it to his address. We got the response, the card back, saying someone purporting to be Michael James had been served. When we sent him the notice of referral to the Attorney General's office for prosecution, he contacted us by email and was like, "What are you talking about? I've never been served. What is this?" And provided us with an address, and it's not Auburn, but it's another address in Alabama. We did serve him there. We did get the green card back. It looks like the signature of Michael Ray James. So.
When was that?
Oh, it was.
No, I mean, when he sent you the email?
It would have been about 4 to 5 months after the commission's first finding of probable cause.
Where did we send the notification of the referral to the Attorney General's office?
If I recall correctly, we sent one to Auburn and one to the address we had in Hawaii.
And which one, and we don't know which one he
It goes by
responded
regular
to?
mail, so nothing bounced back.
Okay.
I mean, he could have been in Hawaii and did mail forwarding, I'm not sure, without having tracked it. But we didn't incur the cost of tracking it because we figured if that's your address and we get a green card back, you get the regular mail. It's just out of an abundance of caution. It gave me pause just to run to OSA and, you know.
What happened to the case after the referral?
It hasn't been, it's not officially referred yet.
Oh, okay.
I guess you would say I recalled it.
Can we procedurally do that though?
But it's not been filed with OSA.
No, but that doesn't matter. Can we proceed? I don't know that we procedurally can do that.
You can find probable cause again.
Right.
Or maybe affirm it.
I don't know that we can do that. I just don't know that.
Stefan, do you have any guidance on this?
Well, I don't think that there's a procedural bar for you finding probable cause again, but maybe an appropriate motion would be this. To the extent we did not previously find probable cause in this action, we
I move that we find probable cause today. I don't think you're finding probable cause twice if you do that. Nor do I think that's really an issue.
Yeah, I think the concern would be, and I think it was good that you looked at it and found it, was that the prior finding of probable cause would, I guess, possibly be considered invalid if he wasn't properly served and had his opportunity to come and say his piece. So now, on this go around, we know that he's been properly served and given his opportunity to come and say his piece, and he hasn't appeared.
It's to cure a defect, so we don't get that OSA and have a motion to dismiss for,
I think under those circumstances, I'll move to make the finding of probable cause based on the substantive allegations and a review of the service issues.
Okay, I'll second that. Any comments or questions? Okay, all those, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
And I promise I'm referring it before he moves again.
All right. Next is in the matter of Henry Lamar Willis.
It's actually a consent order. Do you want to take that up right now?
It's a consent order now.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We'll skip over that. In the matter of Norma Beth Harris, we did that. In the matter of J. Wayne Garner.
For Mr. Garner, there's a preliminary matter that I think the commission should determine. We've had quite a time serving Mr. Garner. He was served this case, which began in 2009, properly at his place of residence. Mr. Garner had a number of personal tragedies befall him when this case was filed. His 18-year-old daughter passed, I think, 2 days before the case was filed by one of his opponents. He has since left, as far as I can tell, his primary residence. It's on the market for sale and it's unoccupied. He has also divested himself of his various businesses in Carroll County and surrounding areas. So we can't serve him at his businesses. All of the addresses that we have on our LexisNexis People Finder show addresses that are unoccupied and currently on the market for sale. And we've sent notices of this hearing to those addresses. They've all come back. Mr. Garner, though, is a registered lobbyist with this commission currently and is actively lobbying in this session. In fact, you could probably find him in the Capitol cafeteria right now. But we're having difficulty in serving him because the address he's given us for his lobbying credentials is P.O. Box 13, Carrollton, Georgia, 30112. All notices sent to that address remain unclaimed and eventually come back to us after the 30-day hold period. We have subsequently mailed him regular mail to an address that he recently affirmed as valid as of January, and that he received notices for his lobbying credentials. He received his lobbyist badge there and he's wearing it. We've also sent notice of this hearing by email to the email address he has on file with the commission. He's getting those email addresses, and we have included within your packet the actual email, is the confirmation that Gmail received it. Like I said, he's received his notice of late fees and what have you through the email account. He just refuses to acknowledge he's received service of this hearing. I don't know if y'all want to proceed or if y'all want us to have a process server try and track him down at the Gold Dome.
He literally has a spot at the Gold Dome with a special mat where he's.
I mean, I guess Ms. Winston.
So we could have the process server go to the Capitol.
If they can find him. That's the.
Yeah.
And the main reason I bring it to you is because there's nothing within the code section that states for a preliminary hearing you have to have notice by a certified mail. You just have to have notice of the hearing. It's like a civil case. If your registered address can receive regular mail and you send regular mail with a certificate of service, good enough. Now for the
Once
OSA
you enter
hearing,
interference in the case, before you can enter interference in the case, you do have to receive it either by physical process server or by other, extraordinary service such as certified mail.
But you have to remember, he received the complaint by certified mail and it was received in return. So he was served properly at the case. So this would be a subsequent mailing.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, if you've already served it by certified mail, then you've served it.
But this was in 2010 when the case began. So he's been properly served of the case. The case is solid.
But the hearing is what you're
The
saying.
hearing is, he's received notice electronically, he's received it by regular mail, he just hasn't returned that stupid green card. that's where the rubber meets the road. I don't know if y'all want to continue that you either have to have a green card for a preliminary hearing or a process server, or is constructive notice good enough for the preliminary hearing? Now, for the OSA hearing, I believe you have to certified mail or a process server. Mr. Christian or Mr. Fuller can correct me if I'm wrong on that one. But for a preliminary hearing, it's just constructive notice. I just want to throw that out before I wasted y'all's time with facts.
I think our history has been that we have done certified mail or some type of process server to make sure that everyone is aware of the hearing.
And forgive me, I don't mean to cut you off, but we did try a process server with this gentleman, and that's how we found out all the residences are on the market unoccupied and the businesses are no longer in. So we have tried, it's just...
The process server just didn't go to the Gold Dome.
Yeah.
I say we give that a shot.
I'm going to make a motion that we table this and attempt to serve him personally.
Ms. Wetzel?
I know what table he sits at lunch as well.
Okay, so we're not required under the statute to give him notice by certified mail. And we're sure he's gotten notice, but not by certified mail.
He's received it electronically through the email that he used to register to get his lobbyist credentials, and he received his lobbyist badge at the PO box that he registered with us in January. So.
Okay, so, I mean, to me, this seems to be sort of a slap in the face.
He's smart enough not to pick up the mail.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly eluding
He is.
service in some respects, but my fear and the reason why I made the motion is that our behavior in the past has been such that if we cannot get somebody's green card back, then we send a process server. And since we know his whereabouts, I feel like and if he doesn't come at that point, then I feel like we need to move forward. But I just, out of an abundance of caution.
And I think the reason I brought it to you all this way is because it's the first time we've ever tried a process server, and the response has been nowhere, no how. Don't know where he is.
Well, I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think Preston deserves some respect, but I think in a case like this where we've complied with the law and someone is apparently intentionally flouting it, that we don't owe them any deference, and he ought to come over here and give us his defense. So with that said, I'll entertain a motion.
I already made the motion.
Okay. What was the motion? The motion was to
Table it and to try to serve him personally.
Okay. Is there a second?
Yeah, I'm actually going to second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. Motion carries. All right, in the matter of John Wells.
This is another one. This is actually the case that Ms. Harris mentioned that she spoke to another school board member on the phone, and he said, I only paid the late fee. And he did pay the late fee. So this is case number 2013-0028 in the matter of John Wells. It was filed by Nathan Smith in October 2013. He was a former member of the Muskogee Board of Education, I think, for 30 years. And during that 30-year tenure, the only violation that he had is that he failed to file a personal financial disclosure statement within 15 days of qualifying in 2013. That is the only violation he's had. So part of the consent order was that he would pay a late fee, and he did pay the late fee. He just has not sent in the signed order. And I've spoken to him multiple times. I'm not sure if it's going to come in the mail today or tomorrow, but so I would ask again that you would find that there's a reasonable basis to believe that a violation occurred, and then secondly, find that approve the terms of the consent order if he were to return the signed order within 30 days.
Mr. Ritter?
And this is a case, normally I wouldn't speak on these cases, but this is a case where Mr. Wells has been someone who has frequently called me, as they do, but he's called me quite a lot of times, and I was the one who said to him, look, we'll accept the consent order and submit that if you'll just pay the late fee and sign the consent order and send it back. It was very clear with him 3 different occasions that that's what he needed to do. He promised me, and this has been going on for weeks, that it was in the mail. It's in the mail, and he has not done so. And but he did send the late fee back in, but did not send the consent order. And we want the consent order to be able to properly close the case. Because we have a complaint in this case. This isn't just a late fee notice. This is when we actually get a complaint that they have violated the law.
All right. Any comments, questions? Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we find that he violated the Campaign Finance Act, and that if he sends in the signed and properly notarized consent order within 30 days, that we'll approve that as well.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. All right. So in the matter of Osborne Nesbitt, that's been continued. So we get to our motions to dismiss. The matter of J.W. Payne.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I don't know if you want, I've sent you a memo, as you know.
Oh, right, I'm sorry.
Summarizing these 4 cases, and you also have materials for the dismissals. If you'd like, I'm sure that Ms. Wetzel and Mr. Lane could go through each one of these, but I don't know that you need that. And I believe that you were at least considering the idea of taking them all just en masse and deciding.
That's right. Thank you for reminding me. Commissioners, if y'all had a chance to review that memo that was emailed around, any questions or comments?
No.
Okay. So the correct procedure is to...
A motion to dismiss those 4 matters.
Okay. I make a motion that we dismiss these 4 items listed under item 5 on our agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, quick point of clarification, does that include the Chip Rogers case? Because there are 6 items on the agenda that were posted on the website.
It does include the Chip Rogers case.
It does?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so I made the motion just with respect to the 4 listed in front of me.
Yeah, Chip Rogers is 2012 48. And that's included.
Okay, I didn't know if we need to clarify the other 2 that are on the publicly posted agenda. We're not dismissing those.
There's a new one.
New agenda, okay, thanks.
Yeah, he's just got.
So just for clarification, why don't we,
Why don't I read them out before that we just dismissed. It's in the matter of J.W. Payne, 2008-0073. In the matter of Robert Bob Hartley, 2008-0018 PC. In the matter of Emmanuel Eves, 060-90-0001-01. And in the matter of Chip Rogers, 2012-0048.
And Mr. Chairman, as well as Mr. Payne's 2008-0096, they're consolidated 2 cases.
Okay, thank you for that correction. Okay, compliance agreement consent orders. Are we going to do these one by one?
Yes.
Okay. Do y'all want to start at the top, or y'all want to take the one that was moved in the matter of Henry Lamar Willis?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay, we'll do Mr. Willis's first.
Okay, Commissioners, this is case number 2013-0010. It was filed by Sheena Harmon on May 16, 2013 against Henry Lamar Willis, who was a former member of the Atlanta City Council. The allegation was that he failed to report 6 contributions totaling $4,250, and he untimely filed 2 campaign contribution disclosure reports and 2 personal financial disclosure statements. In resolving this matter, Mr. Willis has agreed to pay $500 as a civil penalty for failing to disclose the contributions, and he also agrees to pay $500 in late fees. And he will be given 60 days to pay the $1,000. And I ask that you approve this this proposed consent order.
All right, any comments or questions? I move we approve the consent order. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. In the matter of Jack Doyle Taylor.
Commissioners, in case number 2016-0049, Mr. Taylor This case began when a complaint was filed by Mr. Brian Pritchett on August 9, 2016. The respondent was a candidate for the office of the sheriff of Fannin County during the 2016 general election cycle. The respondent filed his declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions on or about December 18, 2015, and qualified for office on or about March 7, 2016. Pursuant to all of the allegations, the complainant alleged that respondent failed to disclose campaign expenditures for newspaper advertising. The premise being that the disclosures and the amounts contained therein the complainant thought weren't high enough, that if you took the off-the-shelf rates for newspaper advertising in that county, he was getting a sweetheart deal and he should have to report the difference. In an affidavit and in speaking with the editor, who was a very colorful gentleman, said, I was happy he was just paying for the amount of time he was advertising, so I gave him a deal, but I gave everyone a deal at that same amount. It's just the normal discount we do for, bulk purchasing of that space that's guaranteed for the better part of 2 months. So the expenditures were properly reported and they were ordinary necessary. And the way I know that he gave the bulk to everyone is there were 4 candidates for Fannin County Sheriff and they all got the same deal from the newspaper editor who was really happy to have the space. That being said, the only violation that was separately noticed by us was that Mr. Taylor failed to use a campaign deposit account. You're required to have a separate campaign depository account. He commingled his funds with his personal account. There was no malfeasance, but he failed to have that separate account, so we are seeking to impose a penalty for that. He has agreed to that violation and penalty and has agreed to pay a civil penalty in the amount of $250. I'd ask that the commission adopt that consent order accordingly.
Any questions or discussion? All right, I move we adopt the consent order as presented. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. The matter of Carlotta Harrell.
Commissioners, in case number 2010-0005, this case began on or about January 21, 2010, when Mr. Aaron Colson filed a complaint against the respondent. The respondent was the former candidate for State Senate District 44, State House District 76, and chairman of the Henry County Board of Commissioners during 2010 and 2012. A number of her races actually overlap, and I think there's actually a problem within the Secretary of State's reporting. I think some of these are special elections, but they're all reported as general elections because you can't qualify to run for the State House and the county at the exact same time. But that's just a small little discrepancy. The violations ranged from that she failed to file CCDR, she failed to report campaign contribution. They threw everything in her except the kitchen sink. What we were able to determine and kind of parse out was that the respondent failed to disclose or failed to file a CCDR for September 30th, 2010 in regards to her House campaign and for election year 2009, or 2010, excuse me. She failed to file a CCDR for October 25, 2010 for her House campaign in 2010. She failed to file an October 25, 2010 election report for her Senate campaign, which was filled by special election. I do know that one for a fact. And then she failed to file a personal financial disclosure statement covering calendar year 2011. So the allegations greatly reduced from the kitchen sink to just those 4 when you pulled apart her 3 separate runs for office. She has agreed to pay a civil penalty in the amount of $125 for violation of the PFDS late filing, $350 in late filing fees, and an additional $475 civil penalty for the total together is $475. It's $125 civil penalty, $350 late filings for a total of $475. That's the extent of her punishment. And we'd ask that the commission adopt the consent order as proposed.
All right, any questions or comments? Okay, I move we adopt the consent order as proposed. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. The matter of Tamala L. Atkins.
In 2010-0069, this case began when Ms. Susan Foster Boyles filed a complaint on November 18th, 2010. The respondent is a former candidate for public office in the 2008 general election for the Georgia Court of Appeals. And again, on the 2010 general election for the Georgia Supreme Court. She was unsuccessful in both of those endeavors. She filed a declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions for the appellate court on June 30th, 2008, and on July 7th, 2010 for the Supreme Court run. She qualified for her respective runs on June 27th, 2008 and July 2nd, 2010. This was another one of those, we're going to throw everything but the kitchen sink at her complaints. But when you boil it down, she failed to timely file a CCDR for her December 31st, 2008 election year for the Court of Appeals in violation of 21534C2A. And she failed to timely file her personal financial disclosure statements for 2007 and 2009 on violation of 21550A1. For the various violations, we are asking for a $100 civil penalty for the late filing of the CCDR, and the payment, and the late fees are lower because of the time these violations occurred. The late fees were smaller. They were raised about 2 years later. $75, the total amount comes to $175 in civil penalties and late fees.
All right, any questions or comments? All right, I move we accept this consent order.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Matter of Charles Ware.
And Commissioners, just by way of your information, I do realize these fines are a little bit lower than normal, but that was in consideration of how old the cases were. It's from 2010, so that's just for the record. For Mr. Ware, this case began on or about September 20th, 2016, when Ms. Margaret Sloan filed a complaint against the respondent. The respondent is the current chairman of Taliaferro County. Taliaferro. There we go. I'll have Ms. Wetzel pronounce it every time we.
Taliaferro with a V.
During the 2015 general election cycles, when he was most recently reelected, he filed his declaration of intention to accept campaign contributions on June 17th, 2011. At the time of the alleged violation, he was declared candidate for public office, so he had a duty to disclose all of his various expenditures and what have you. The complaint basically alleged he didn't, but when you actually look at his records, he did. Just because you think he spent more money doesn't mean he did. But he failed to file his calendar year 2011 and 12 personal financial disclosure statements, just completely failed to file them. We are asking for a civil penalty in the amount of $600 and a $250 late fee. There is a caveat that he is given credit for any late fees that he has currently paid in relation to these two late filings. We're still looking at a system to make sure we give him proper credit for any payments. But it would be a total of $850 in civil penalties and late fees, minus any credits he's already got with us.
So this is consistent with what we've been doing in the other cases, I mean, the penalties.
It's a 2016 case, so the penalties are actually higher because it's a brand new case. It's one of the few new ones we brought you this time around. The other individuals got breaks.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I move we accept this consent order. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the motion carries. In the matter of Aaron Watson.
In case number 2009-0027, this case began on or about October 23rd, 2009, when Ms. Carolyn Sage filed a complaint against Mr. Aaron Watson. At the time, Mr. Watson was the post 2 at-large council member for the city of Atlanta. He qualified for office, or filed his DOI on May 19th, 2009, qualified for office, and re-qualified for re-election on August 26th, 2013. Unfortunately, or depending on your perspective, he was unsuccessful. We don't really take a position either way. What we did find in reviewing the complaint is that Mr. Watson failed to disclose and itemize his campaign expenditures that were greater than $100. He basically just put in sums. Additionally, we noticed that he had some personal expenditures. He had $470 on one visit to Hennessy Jaguar, and then $553 on another visit to Hennessy Jaguar. At first, I was mildly considering, campaign expenditure for your personal car, but when I found that his wife's car also needed servicing and he used campaign funds, it kind of all went out the window. He does realize that it was not a good thing. He has since reimbursed the campaign, donated to charity, but he's looking to wrap it up. He's out of office. He's just ready to put this to bed. In that light, he's looking to pay a civil penalty of $300 for basically the conversion of the monies for Jaguar or the Hennessy Jaguar, and then $375 in late filing fees for his untimely filing of campaign contribution disclosure reports. They are timely filed. It's just, or they're untimely filed, but they are otherwise complete, aside from the personal expenses we've identified. So it's a total of $675 in civil penalties and late fees. And if memory serves me correctly, I think he's paid it, or it's one of those checks in the mail. I just don't remember if we received the check. But as of last week, it's in the mail, because he understands he has 30 days from today's date. And I believe he's aware of Thompson High. So if he doesn't pay, we can have this reference fine.
He's a what?
He's an attorney with Thompson High, I believe that's Mr. Evans' firm. So if he doesn't pay, we'll just have Mr. Evans go find him.
That's good enough.
Can we just serve Mr. Evans?
All right, I move we adopt the terms of this consent order. Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in approval say aye. In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. In the matter of Robert P. Jones.
Commissioners, this is case number 2013-0024. It was filed by Leon Bridges on August 15, 2013 against, at the time, what was Pickens County sole commissioner, Robert Jones. This case, this is actually a compliance order in lieu of a consent order, because felt that the violation that occurred was somewhat borderline. In 2009, respondent attended a Georgia Republican Party meeting in Savannah, Georgia. His associate used his county credit card to book the hotel room, which is not a proper expense for the county. We don't deal with that, though. He promptly reimbursed the county once he was going through his expenses, but he reimbursed it with campaign funds. So there's a provision in the law, it's OCGA 21-5-30.2, where a candidate or campaign committee is prohibited from accepting a contribution from a public agency. What he should have done and could have done is that he should have reimbursed the county with his personal funds and then reimbursed himself with campaign funds. But he chose, and incorrectly chose, to reimburse himself directly, reimburse the county directly from his campaign. Looking at this case, there's no malintent. Felt like this was one that really qualified for a compliance order. He's agreed to not violate the act any further, and to, in the future, reimburse county expenses with his personal funds.
All right, I move that we accept this compliance order.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. The matter of Janie B. Reed.
Commissioners, this is case number 2011-0010 in the matter of Janie B. Reed. This was filed by Billy Webster against former Putnam County Commissioner Janie Reed. Billy Webster was also a county commissioner at the same time. In the complaint, he made several allegations, some about conflict of interest, which those are not within our jurisdiction, so those were dismissed and not addressed in the consent order. However, there were several allegations that remained, and that was that she filed some reports late, and that mainly that she failed to disclose fiduciary positions on her PFDS. She responded very promptly to the complaint, explained that she did not believe at the time that she filed her personal financial disclosure statements that those actually were fiduciary positions that she was required to report, and she promptly corrected that. The violations in the complaint were substantiated, and in the consent order, the violations that are left are that she filed 3 personal financial disclosure statements late in violation of OCGA 21-550, that she filed 1 CCDR late in violation of 21-5-34, and that she failed to disclose fiduciary positions on separate PFDSs 7 times. As a result of this, she has agreed to pay $375 in late fees and $175 civil penalty. And again, just to reiterate what Mr. Lane said, this is a 2011 case. When we were calculating and asking for civil penalties, we took the length of time that had passed since the filing of the complaint to now into consideration. And she was extremely responsive. So in total, she will remit to the commission $550, and she's actually already submitted that payment. So I asked that the commission adopt the consent order that was agreed to by the respondent.
All right, any questions or comments?
Is she still in office?
She is not.
It's refreshing, I guess, that she's as responsive as she was, and she's not.
She was incredibly responsive. She was incredibly responsive. She was very pleasant to work with. You're exactly right. That is impressive.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept it.
I'll second that. It's been moved and seconded to accept this consent order. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. In the matter of Edmund Richardson.
Commissioners, this is case number 2013-0007. In the matter of Edmund Richardson. Mr. Richardson was a candidate for DeKalb County Commission. The complaint had several allegations, 5 allegations. In response to the complaint, he provided detailed responses to each allegation and then also provided documentation. At the conclusion of the investigation, it was determined that he was able to show that 4 of the allegations were unfounded or were simply scrivener's errors or just where the data entry person in their campaign messed up, and he subsequently corrected those. So there was only 1 remaining allegation, and that was that he filed a report late. And he actually paid the late fee before the complaint was even filed. So in considering that, no civil penalty was imposed due to the passage of time and the fact that he had already paid the late fee prior to us inquiring about the matter. And he was, again, super responsive, provided great responses and detailed documents supporting that they were indeed just technical defects.
All right, any questions? Okay, I move we accept the terms of this consent order. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion carries. Okay, so I think we're done with our compliance agreements, consent orders. Report of the executive secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can speak from my place.
Yes, sir.
I will move very quickly through this. I have sent you a memo, first of all, on the administrative dismissal, so I will not belabor each one of those unless there are questions on any of those particular administrative dismissals. Just to restate the rule for the record, our rule calls for administrative dismissal of cases where, although we had jurisdiction initially, or thought we did, we find in fact that there is no fact that would support in any way the complaint, or it's not a violation of the law that's been alleged, or there's no jurisdiction for the case. There were 15 such cases as we went through the cleanup of the backlog that we recently have administratively dismissed. Since the last meeting, a number of them were just frankly ones that were outside of any sort of potential statute of limitations, no service and so forth, and other things. Which, since we've already covered the issue regarding contribution limits, let me go straight to the backlog issue then. What we define as the backlog are the cases that were inherited by Ms. Wetzel and Mr. Lane when they began, 171 cases. As of today, we have closed 159 of those cases, and 3 of those cases are not closed because they were tabled today for further consideration. Our backlog percentage closure rate now is at 93%, almost on the button. Which is good, and by June, it's going to be about as close to 100% as you can get. It's actually about as close to 100% right now as you can get, but we've got those few that were tabled, and we've got a few where we didn't submit them to you because there were issues still with service on those, or some other thing that would prevent us from saying this is ready to submit at the last minute, like discussions on consent orders or whatever that are still ongoing. So anyway, we're very close to having those closed out. Right now we have 116 cases pending, which are all cases, or almost all cases, that are after the backlog, and we're moving on those rapidly. I'm going to have to find new work for our attorneys. But no, I want to stop for a moment and compliment them on a great job as they move through this. So, legislative update. At my request, and at his own initiative, Chairman Wendell Willard, House Representative, Chair of the House Judiciary Committee, introduced HB 399, which would have been a cleanup bill for the Ethics in Government Act, or the Campaign Finance Act. There were a lot of other things on his plate, and they ultimately decided not to push it through committee because they did not think it could get done this year. So we'll revisit it next year. I will tell you that there were several things that were of concern that were surprising to me that people had concerns about, and we will address those or just drop them. None of those would have affected our day-to-day practice at all. There were a couple of things that I'd hoped that we could get through. One was a formal cleaning up of the way that filing is done by locals, which is a serious problem, but I think we can address that at least in the very short term administratively. And I've got some thoughts on that, but this isn't the day for it. And also to change the way that draconian lobbyist penalties arise, which is just extraordinary that if they miss for 30 days, they're going to be paying $10,000 fee. It's a fee, not even a fine, for that failure to file. So that was not changed, but again, we'll hope for next year to fix that up. Let me move on to our office space. Construction has begun on expanding our office space, which is great. It'll be done within a month-ish. The deadline actually is the 5th of May, but they're ahead of schedule now, which is great. Surprising. I'd love for you all to come over and visit as you have time to come see what we've got. But we think that when you see our space, you're going to be like, wow, this is great. As you know, we don't have enough space to be able to hire the people we could hire if we had a place to have them sit. So we'll have that. And we will make appropriate hires or changes to do that. And we are reconsidering assignments of certain staff to reconfigure some of our work to fit into that. Which brings me to the employee update, and I will tell you that I think that we have a very good set of employees. There are always a few issues that happen day to day, but I think that overall things have been going very well. And again, we will be looking in the next month and a half to probably do some reassignments of duties to better function, and also doing reviews of everybody. And then there will be merit-based raises. The General Assembly, I believe, will be approving 2% on our budget for merit-based raises, but that doesn't mean everybody gets 2%. Some people will make it 1%, some people make it 5, 6, 7, 10%. So typically, I've been assigned the duty to take care of that, but I'd be happy to discuss that with any of the commissioners who would like that, with the chair. And that's my report. Thank you very much. We made it by 2.
Great, thank you very much. And I'd reiterate what you said. I think the staff is doing a really good job, so including the 2 lawyers up there. So thank y'all, thank everybody. We appreciate it. What is next? We have public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Christian, Mr. Fultz.
Thank you.
Oh, no, what? There you go.
16.
You're on. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would report on, actually, I know we've had a lot of discussions about going to OSA and what that looks like. Well, I'm happy to report that last Friday I took a case to an administrative hearing at OSA. And just by way of brief background, it was a It's an old case involving Carolyn Cosby, who was well, 6 cases. A woman who is a resident up in Cherokee County who established 6 different, what we argued, independent committees that weren't registered with the commission, but were out advocating for various candidates for the local commission election, and as well as distributing flyers, signs, raising money, that sort of thing. And we had a full-fledged hearing with evidence being presented, and so now we will await a decision from the OSA judge, which should be coming within 30 to 60 days. When I get that decision, probably it will be in by our next meeting. I'll give a more detailed report on the specifics of it. But the one thing I wanted to mention is that the perspective that I gained through that experience, and maybe I'll speak for Ms. Wetzel and Mr. Lane as well, is there's a lot of discussion here about candidates who fail to disclose or fail to timely report, but from what we saw, we actually got to speak to some constituency in the local area that was affected by this failing to report. In particular, I had a chance to speak with a person who ran or attempted to run for local commission, and this Ms. Cosby spread a lot of literature about him in the local area, and he was defeated. And he was very affected by her engagement in this activity, and had no way to redress all the information, or rebut rather, all the information that was distributed about him, because he couldn't go to the commission's website to pull up the disclosure report, to pull up who had donated money, who was authoring certain information. And for me, that was very impactful, hearing sort of where the rubber meets the road with all of what we do here, how people are affected at the local level. And so I look forward to our next meeting. I'll give a more full report, and maybe even, hopefully we get a favorable decision, and then the commission will be deciding the penalty from the findings from the court. But
what year was that case before us? Do you remember?
2012 to 2014.
2 were 2012 cases and 4 were 2014 cases.
You know, so not terribly old, but old enough, and hopefully if maybe it's appropriate, we'll have some people who were, I guess, affected by it. If the court finds favorably in us, I think it would be helpful for the commission in its consideration of what to do in the situation, to speak to some of the citizens who were affected by this woman's conduct. So that's the only report I have. I know, well, I'll just add to that the staff has sent me an additional cases to replace the ones that I've disposed of from Ms. Cosby. So I'll more frequently have updates from taking cases to OSA, which is an interesting endeavor in and of itself, dealing with opposing counsel and that sort of thing. So that's all I have to report on. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And I think your idea about having some of those people affected is a good one, because I think we hear a lot of people that stand up here and say, well, you know, it's just someone didn't like me, or anonymous person, you know, and I think sometimes we lose sight of the people on the other end of these things are detrimentally impacted in a real way. So I would welcome that, and you know, if y'all can work with Christian to accommodate the schedule if anybody wants to come, we'll put it at the top of the agenda as far as I'm concerned.
And just to that point, I would add, I know in our office we have with regard to some of these complaints, you know, it's the people that don't like you, or people who are your opponents, are the ones who file these complaints. I mean, your friends aren't going to be like, oh, by the way, you don't have to register, I'm going to file a complaint, but I don't mean anything by it. So by the very nature of the complaints, they are adversarial, and even taking that to account with dealing with Ms. Cosby, certainly there are people, again, the candidates who go to the local coffee shops, speak to people, and they say, hey, I got this mailer that says you were X, Y, and Z, or you voted for something. What do you have to say about that? And it's like, that's completely false. I don't know who distributed that. It doesn't say paid for by. So I thought that was a very insightful experience, and hopefully I'll share more of that next meeting.
Great. Thank you. All right, public comments. I don't know if we have any of the public here. All right, well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved to second that we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, we are adjourned.